Call the meeting to order. I think we're on, Bert, aren't we? Good afternoon and welcome to the monthly meeting of the City of Des Moines Zoning Board of Adjustment. This board has the power under Iowa law and the zoning ordinance of the City of Des Moines to hear requests for variances and exceptions from the regulations in the zoning ordinance, conditional use permits, and appeals from the decision of the staff and the administration of the zoning ordinance, and to make decisions in such matters. This is going to be an informal meeting. Is currently being recorded. The board members have received a copy of the agenda, staff report, and recommendations. Copies of the agenda, staff report, and recommendations are available to the public in those two trays on my left. We have two members that won't be here today. On the far right, Jake Christensen has a conflict, and on my right, Tom Clark Sr. is ill today, so I'm sure he's watching on TV right now. I'll introduce the members that are here. On my right, we have Brooke Rosenberg. Next to him is Cindy Smith. On my left, I have Mel Pins. Next to him is Linda Westergaard. My name's Bill Gray. Representing City Legal today on my left is Michael Kelly. Representing city staff today, we have Eric Lundy, City Planner, Bert Drost, City Planner, Sue Ann Donovan, Zoning Enforcement Officer, and Emmanuel Toribio, a City Planner. The Board is required to base its decision in each case upon the criteria established by law for the type of relief sought by the applicant. The law applicable to each case is identified in the written staff report. If the facts, as determined by the Board, demonstrate that the criteria established by law for granting the relief have been satisfied, then the Board must grant the relief. Otherwise, the Board must deny the relief. All speakers are requested to focus their comments upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law have been satisfied. Each appeal will be announced in order, and the staff will present a brief explanation of the appeal. Any written comments received by the staff prior to the hearing will be distributed to the Board or otherwise identified. All speakers are requested to speak from the podium here on my right and to begin their presentation by giving both their name and address. The applicant or representative of the applicant will be allowed to speak first and be allowed 10 minutes to present their appeal. Anyone else present in support of the appeal then will be allowed 5 minutes each to present his or her comments. Anyone present in opposition to the appeal will then be allowed 5 minutes each to present his or her comments. The applicant then will be allowed 3 minutes for rebuttal or other closing comments. The meeting will then be closed to the public comment and the Board will make a decision. That decision and reason will be announced. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report unless an individual present or member of the Board requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda and separately considered under the public hearing agenda. The decisions of this Board can only be appealed to the Polk County District Court. If you believe you have been harmed by an error made by this Board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the District Court within 30 days of the filing of the Board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this Board are wrong, you may petition the City Council to change those regulations. All material written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation will become a permanent part of the record and will not be returned. If you have cell phones on out there, we ask you to turn them off or put them on silent because they get to be very disruptive to the process here. We will be taking a short break around the 3 or 3:30 time frame if needed. Let's go right to the agenda. As I mentioned, we have a consent agenda items, and Bert, we got a couple changes that you'd like to identify.
Yeah. Chair, members of the Board, item number 3 has received a couple of comment cards in opposition, so we'll just hear that one briefly as a discussion item. That's the appeal at 4136 East Ovid Avenue. I'd also point out that the appeal on item number 4 at the Wastewater Reclamation Authority has been withdrawn, so we will not be hearing that one today. And then item number 15 is an appeal at 3601 Washington Avenue. It's for the addition of a garage. They have an attached one-car garage. They would want to make that a two-car garage. Staff is in support. We've only gotten comment cards from one neighbor in support and from the Beaverdale Neighborhood Association in support. So we recommend that be moved to the consent portion of the agenda. So. Okay.
Before we move or vote on item 15, is there anybody here in opposition to item 15? Has everybody had a chance to look at item 15? If there's no objections, I'll entertain a motion to move it to the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to move item 15 to the consent agenda for granting of the variance as requested.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0, so we'll be moving item 15 to the consent. So with those changes, I'm going to read off the consent agenda items. What that means, folks, is that we're going to vote on them all at once. So when I read these off, if you're here to speak in opposition, I'm going to ask you to let us know. Item 1 is a conditional use permit in the vicinity of 1751 Maury. Item 2 is an exception at 1633 48th Street. Item 5 is an exception at 1020 Nob Hill Drive. Item 6 is a variance at 2610 56th Street. Item 7 is an exception at 4321 Woodland. And item 8 is an exception at 3611 6th Avenue. On those items and item 15, which we just voted on, is a variance at 3601 Washington Avenue. Is there anybody here on those items that I just read off? Is there anybody here to speak in opposition to any of them? Any board members have any concerns? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to grant approval of the exceptions, variances, and conditional use permits that have been requested for items number 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 15, subject to staff recommendations.
Here a second?
I'll second that motion.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Motion carries 5-0. So if you're here for any of those items that we just read off, they've been approved. You're free to sit around and watch your city government at work, or you can go get your permits and get started. And also, item 4, if anybody was here for item 4, it has been pulled from the agenda. We aren't even going to hear that today. So if you're here to speak on item 4, it's over and done as well. Thank you. Okay, that moves to the public hearing agenda. We'll start with item 3. Oh, I'm sorry.
How would you know when we find out when we come here for? Because these are, there was a,
Which,
we tried to get a carport, a bill.
do you know which item that is, Bert?
I believe it's number 1 Street. Yeah, I think it's 10 or 11.
Oh, okay.
So that'll be coming up.
Yeah, yeah, we're going to call them out in order, so you're going to be right near the front. Okay? You bet. On the public hearing agenda, item 3 is an exception at 4136 East Ovid. And Cindy, you want to make a little statement?
Yeah, I wanted to make everyone aware this was my primary residence before I moved to where I'm at, so I used to live there.
Okay.
And I
How
know
long
some-
ago, though?
It was, we moved in 1989 or 90.
Okay, all right.
And I still know some of the people in the area, so just FYI.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 3 is a request to build an 8-foot by 20-foot storage shed in the rear yard area. It would be in addition to an existing 720 square foot detached garage. The subject property is on East Ovid Avenue, just to the west of East 42nd Street. The property contains a single-family house with an existing 720 square foot detached garage, and they're also in the process of building an 8-foot by 20-foot storage shed. When they learned they needed a building permit, they stopped construction and put a tarp over the top of it. So it's why it looks like it does right now. But here's a photo from the street. You can see the 20-foot by 8-foot deep shed that was under construction. It would have a gabled roof with the gables on the east and west ends. The way it was described, they would have a pedestrian door, a walk door on the side, and a window as well. Here's another picture of the house, and then just from another angle.
Bert, do you have a picture of the garage, too?
No,
I think just that corner piece.
yeah,
Okay.
in the consent map, we had 2 cards come back against it and 1 in support. And this map here shows, you can see the shed would be constructed on what's the existing driveway.
And Bert, while the structures indicated there were some measurements, the structure hasn't been drawn to scale necessarily, has it?
Correct.
Okay. Be a little bigger than that.
Yeah, if you picture the garage is 24 feet wide and the proposed shed is 20, so it would really be almost as wide as that shed there. They're allowed to have 20% of the rear yard covered by accessory structures, which for this property equals 780 square feet. Therefore, they're going over that by 100 square feet. By right, they could have another 60 square feet. So really, the exception today is just whether or not they can have a 60 square foot storage shed versus a 160 square foot storage shed. Staff has recommended approval of it, just subject to the 4 standard conditions. 1, any accessory building shall be constructed in compliance with the building code with necessary building permits. 2, any accessory structure shall be constructed with building materials that are compatible with the primary dwelling, such as horizontal lap siding and asphalt shingles. 3, no portion of the accessory structure shall be used as a dwelling unit. And 4, the accessory structure shall not be used in conjunction with a home-based business. And I did have a conversation with the applicant about the garage sales. We had heard from neighbors that they might be having more than 2 garage sales per calendar year. They indicated that they do comply with that. They only have 2 4-day garage sales per year, but I can let the applicant explain that more. But that was one of the concerns I had heard from neighbors, was that they were having a lot of garage sales and storing a lot of stuff on this property. So, are there any questions?
Bert, yeah, they can have, if it's under 100 square foot, they can go ahead and they can build it and have it there no matter what.
Well, they could have up to 60 square feet.
60 square feet.
Because you still can't exceed your 20% rear yard.
Right.
So if
open
they
space.
wanted to,
Yeah.
they could actually put that in and wouldn't even be before us.
Right. If it's under 120 square feet, they wouldn't even need a building permit, but they would still be limited to the 60 square feet.
Then, in the way they built this thing, do we know, I saw it was covered, do we know what materials they started out with, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have a question. Is there a height that, I drove by and
her
I looked at
microphone
it,
on?
it's awfully tall.
Yeah.
It seems more, it looked more to me than just a shed. When you think of a shed, you think kind of a smaller unit that you would add for lawnmowers or, accessory kinds of equipment.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's a very large structure.
Yeah. They would be limited to 17 feet in height. That's what the zoning limits accessory buildings to.
Okay. Oh, you got the master control.
So you
Do you
could
know
go up to 17.
how tall it is?
I don't know. I would be surprised if that's more than 17 feet. But
And Bert, while we can't really see how this structure would relate to the existing garage, would they have appropriate setbacks from side yard, rear yard, and a neighboring structure?
yeah.
And
since it's in the rear yard, they would only have to be 2 feet from the property lines per zoning, but
Okay.
for building code, they would have to be 5 feet.
All right,
from
so they need
property
5 feet to the garage and 2 feet to the property lines.
lines. Correct.
Okay.
Well, yeah. But for building code, if it's less than 5 feet from another building or from a property
Even if it's
line,
across the property.
have a
And it
fire.
doesn't look like we have that problem here.
no.
Okay. All right.
But are there any guidelines, if they build that shed there, can they still get in and out? Is that still acceptable for their 2-car garage?
It looks like it could still work. I mean, there really isn't any
There's no.
city ordinance that would
Okay.
require them to maintain a certain amount of maneuvering space.
Ask them. Ask them.
Any other questions? Thanks, Bert. Applicant or representative of the applicant?
Hello. I'm Christine Lyon, 4136 East Ovid Avenue in Des Moines.
Okay.
We considered the shed when we were putting it in, the way we put it in the back of the lot, to consider the neighbors to our east because they do have a garden area. And a more blockier shed would have, blocked the sun from their garden area and such. Height-wise, I think that it's 14 and a half height. That's my guess. I don't remember exactly. We considered all the correct materials we were supposed to use in building it, and 16-inch centers for the studs. And We have the shingle roof to match the house and the garage, which we haven't put on yet, but we have the materials for it. And as far as the siding and everything, that we were planning on the color matching the house also. And I think we've met the criteria that was set out that we checked online, you know, as far as setbacks and everything, that I think we've matched that.
Okay. Have you seen the staff recommendations and the conditions they're putting on it?
Yes.
Okay, and you're in agreement with that? Have you seen the neighbors' comments?
No.
Want to get those out, Mel? Just take a minute, just glance at it. There's some pretty heavy opposition.
Okay.
So, thanks, Eric. Just kind of glance at them.
Okay.
The reason I'm having you look at that is, you know, we take these comment cards very seriously. So that's why I asked staff if you can build your accessory structure if it would drop to 100 feet, I guess. So, but I'm more interested in seeing what the neighbors, you know, how do you plan to address the neighbors' concerns?
Well, as far as the first one, I do think that it conforms with the regulations that the city has put forth. As far as the other one, since we conform, I don't know what the problem would be with this one. I do know that it does create a barrier between our yard and their backyard, which has a very large swimming pool and deck area that takes up their entire backyard. And so I would think it would afford them more privacy, and we don't have to hear their, you know, their pump equipment and stuff running all the time.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I have a question. Do you just use that for storage? Because as I mentioned to staff,
Right.
it seems like an awfully big unit for storage. And since I did used to live there, I do know that the
Right.
garage that was built was built oversized. So you could put cars, boats, lots of equipment in there. There's also a storage area underneath the addition on the back of the house.
Right.
So it just seems like there's adequate storage capacity. So a couple of questions. You know, you keep saying that you build it accordingly, but you never got a building permit, which is a concern when people do not get a building permit initially to get things done. Is there a different place that this could be set, or maybe just go 60 square feet, which is what you would be allotted with a proper building permit?
Well, the area that's under the back porch, the small storage area there, is a playhouse. So that's what is in that area right now for our grandchildren. We do have our granddaughter and grandchildren moved in, which might be why some people mistake that we were having a garage sale when it was actually a lot of movement of bringing them in to live with us. And we did set the shed up the way that we did because so that we would have access to the garage for parking there. Right now, we're using that for storage, and we'd like to be able to park in there, so we put the shed there for that reason.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anybody else here to speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition? Any last questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll go to close the public portion and go to board decision.
I would move staff recommendations.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
I'm going to oppose mainly because I just think it's oversized for the area.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Those opposed, motion carries 4-1. Get your permit. Item 9 is a variance and exception at 4102 Southeast 10th.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, this came to our attention based on a violation. I don't know if we can zoom in a little bit better. The lighting's kind of tough. Maybe it's better on your screen. Property that is where East Marion curves around to Southeast 10th Street. These lots on the west side of both sides of Southeast 10th were developed rather shallow. And so, and the housing styles were very homogeneous in terms of the footprint. There was a pretty standard footprint for this subdivision as a whole. If you look at the aerial, you can kind of see the size of that original footprint. Now this property had a addition off the back, which further shortened its rear yards. So the constraint that this property ends up dealing with is a 576 square foot maximum under the way our zoning ordinance is currently written. There's three existing. This appeal really pertains to the carport shed built to the north of the house. There's two other buildings that were maximized under the old standard, which was allowed 30% of the rear yard. And so those all proceed and can remain as is, regardless of what may or may not happen with regard to this building. But they are actually non-conforming because of the current standard would only allow the 576, so even they exceed what the standard is. This little sketch may give you a better sense of what's going on now. The shed in question, and it's a carport, but it's more of an enclosed kind of carport, metal carport design. It is behind the front edge of the dwelling, but they are also proposing a drive to it. Now, the zoning ordinance allows you to have a wide driveway even beyond 25% of your front yard area if it's to a 3 or 4 car garage. Well, they've already exercised that first driveway, so this second driveway is still subject to the provisions of the zoning ordinance for the 25% of the front yard area. So that would push them into having to have relief of that. So that's the other component of relief. So we have the total area of accessory buildings. We have the percentage of paved area in the front yard, and then also the side yard setback. This was built within 2 feet of the north property line. Well, when a building is in the side yard, it has to meet the same setbacks as the house under the current zoning. So they'll also have to appeal that under a variance. This is a photo looking from the east, from the street. You can see there's probably been some, moderate traffic. We did have a bad summer in terms of keeping lawns green, so anything might have damaged it. A couple of trips across it could have caused what you see there. This shows you the garage, the other existing garage. This is more of a wide-angle view. And then you can sort of see the shed in the back that's north of the existing garage, detached garage. And staff would note that this property is very well maintained, and the property owner keeps everything clean and manicured, and a very well kept property. However, in looking at the character of the area and the criteria by which we have to have grant variances, it is basically an overbuilt property. And there's some other concerns beyond just the zoning in terms of achieving meeting building code. They are going to, if this is granted, they are going to have to demonstrate based on their proximity to the property line to the north, and also make sure that they also structurally installed the necessary footing and so forth. They may have to do some modifications to what's there to meet code. So I wanted to make the board aware of that. But staff, in looking at the variance criteria strictly, doesn't find that there's been a demonstrated basis for meeting an unnecessary hardship, and also in terms of the essential character. So we are recommending denial at this point. So, and we didn't really have any intermediary option because even if you remove that structure, you're right at, you're at exception level appeals to leave what's remaining. So there really wasn't much of an option to do something reduced. It's either kind of maintain how it was built and make sure that it meets code, or remove it to meet the character from the staff perspective. So.
Questions for staff? Brooke?
Eric, I'm a little confused. You said what's there now, not counting that shed, is legal,
if you take this
legal
out, it's also,
non-conforming?
there isn't any, we couldn't reduce this and consider it under exception level appeal only because basically to keep the previously built structures puts you into that exception level already. What happened was when they were built, the standard was 30% of the rear yard. Now the standard limits them to 576 square feet. So the non-conforming portion of what was previously there pretty much eats up what we would be able to grant just as an exception. And they can have that by right because it's been there and it preceded.
So there's nothing they have to do with those present buildings?
It really doesn't, other than that the fact that those are there sort of consumes any type of exception level
Relief.
you would grant, or if you reduce the level of appeal, if that makes any sense. I know it's a little hard.
I think so. I'm not
Say we
sure.
take away the metal carport structure.
In the back.
If you wanted to, give relief of an exception, you would barely be getting what was already built on the site still.
Yeah. Eric, it looks like the one carport, I'm guessing, is probably a camper or some RV, and even if it's a vehicle, are they required to have some kind of a paved or hard surface driveway to access garages?
They really aren't if it's not regular traffic.
Okay.
Sounds like they wanted that.
And how do, yeah, sure. But how do you determine what regular traffic constitutes? Because we don't have a curb cut here
I
either.
think if they're moving an antique vehicle out a couple times a year,
Okay.
that's probably you probably don't warrant
Sure.
having the
Or you go
pavement.
camping once every
Yeah.
second or third
The pavement is actually more of an impact than, if it's only used infrequently, than
Sure.
having it.
Okay.
Now, if there's a lot of traffic going in and out, yeah, we
Yeah,
would
I
want
just
to
wanted
do
to see
that.
where your differential was on when it's required or when it's not. So in this case, that is not an issue here.
Yeah, the application indicated it's really for things that aren't moved in and out too frequently, but.
And did you
I'll let
say
the- I'll let
that,
the appellant speak to that.
sure, did you say that some of the structures or some of the paving was done before some of the current lot standards were implemented on open space?
No, this driveway that they have already
Yeah.
is allowed as a matter of right, because anything, even if it
Okay.
exceeded 25%, they're allowed to have up to a 4-car garage driveway, basically,
Right,
under the ordinance, without
sure.
being in violation
Yeah,
of
so if you have a 2-car garage, you can have a 2-wide drive by right.
Right, or 3 or 4, actually.
So from your perspective, and I see in the other photo, we've got contiguous paving between them and the neighbor there.
Yeah,
Did the other neighbor maybe fill that in, or I'll kind of
Yeah,
ask and see
I don't
here.
know the
Okay.
history of that, where the property line sits and how they decided.
Okay,
Maybe I have a photo to show. It looks like
Yep.
they even got a drive approach permit to fill in the approach, so.
well, they filled in the approach, did they? Whether they
I
have
don't
a
know,
permit or not.
I didn't
Okay.
look into the record of the
All
drive
right.
approach.
And
so-
can you show us the consent map?
Yes. I have it. Hold on.
In the cards I saw, I didn't see too much red in there.
No, but I'm just curious if the guy to the south thinks it's cool, so. No card, okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Eric. Applicant or representative of the applicant?
Okay, my name is Ronald Raines, and I live at 4102 Southeast 10th in regards to this metal building on the south side, or north side of my property. I had it put up about 3 years ago, and I asked LCI, they're the ones that did it, asked them if I needed a permit, and they said no, because it was just sitting there. And so I said, well, let's go ahead. Originally, it was just a metal down the sides, halfway, and then open. And I went out there one day, and there's cats climbing all over. I got a Model A that I parked there, and a 67 Mustang.
Okay.
And I found cats climbing all over it, so I asked them what it would take to enclose it. And they gave me a figure, so I had them enclose the ends and the sides. And then I had a city inspector come by. Well, I got a letter, and I came down to the city, and I talked to them, and they said, well, it wasn't legal. I had to have a permit. And I said, okay. And then they said, well, you got to get a variance because I'm 3.5 feet from the house and I'm 2 feet from the line. And I said I have to have 7 feet. So I didn't have enough footage there. That's the reason why I'm here today, see if I can't get this. As far as the driveway from the metal building out to the street, they said they would put it in at request. I don't have to have it. I take those cars out just like if I'm going to a parade or if I'm taking it out to a car show. They're not driven a whole lot. I told my wife not to water that area just in case I did get a permit to put a concrete in. So that's the reason why it's dry looking right now. As far as the other permits, and I did have a permit to do my driveway, and I got an extension permit on that side. My neighbor got an extension permit on the regular side of the driveway to have that done. That was all through the city. I had a 4-season I built on the back of the house. I did get a permit for that. My existing shed I got back there, I had a permit. And the garage, it was already built when I moved in. So, I mean, I'm not trying to, you know, just go overboard with somebody, but I use it for storage. And I was either put up the shed or maybe sell my property and buy something bigger somewhere else. I also have a 57 Chevy that I store in the other garage, and then the wife parks in there too. So my garage space is pretty well utilized.
Wondering where it was all going.
I think maybe we need to do a site inspection to check this out closer.
You can come on out if you'd like.
Yeah, we need
Sounds
a set of
interesting.
keys too.
Yeah.
I want to just give a little bit of procedural information, not only for you, but for everybody else out here. As you can see, we have a 5-member board here. We have to, in order for your appeal to pass, you have to have 4 affirmative votes. It's not a 3-2 vote like in most normal lists. You got to have 4 affirmative votes. So if any of you at any time feel that you might want to delay the hearing until next month, there's no guarantee we'll have a full 7-member board then, but if you feel that you want to try and get a better chance of your appeal being passed, you can request that at any time. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Okay. Well, when I talked to the city inspector over there, he'd looked at it. He said that if it did pass, I would have to put a firewall on the north side, which I don't have a problem doing that, tearing that down that side and putting it in. I really don't know what else to say. I try to keep my property well up and maintained, so.
Looks very good, and you might want to look at your comment cards too. You got a lot of neighbors that really like what you do, so kind of nice to see.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Just a brief one. Mr. Raines, you said something about you were seeking our approval for the footings. If I understand that right, we can't grant you any variances on building code requirements. We can just grant you some variances or exceptions on square footage allotments and how near it is to another structure, et cetera. But if you've got to put in better footings, perhaps, than maybe what LCI did, I'm not sure if that was a concern of yours or not.
No, I think maybe you misunderstood me.
Okay.
The concrete drive going from the building out to the street. They said they'd put that in to see if I couldn't get it.
Right, okay.
It really don't make any difference. If I can't have it, if I can keep the building.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the main thing.
No, and my question about the driveway was more about if it was required or not. It sounds like it's not required, and it sounds like the way you're using your cars, they don't come out that often, so. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else here to speak in support? Is there anybody here to speak in opposition? Any last questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public portion, go to board decision.
I personally have some concerns with people just throwing accessory buildings into their yards and adding more and more, and, you know, like the first appellant that was up and on East Ovid and talked about that particular property. You know, I think sometimes it has to get to a point where people should rent a storage space not on their property. Instead of trying to use every square inch plus more, plus more, plus more, I think it intrudes on other neighbors. You know, he's got some support of some neighbors close by, but, I mean, where do you draw the line?
You know, and looking at what he's brought in, he doesn't have a shabby place. Keeps the place up pretty good. Neighbors really do like him. And he's got kind of a unique set of circumstances that he has some classic vehicles, and in my view, and it's always been my view, and ever since I've been on this board, I'd rather have people live in this fine city than move somewhere else and take their tax money with them.
Right, and I understand that, but I think it gets to a point, you know, like we own a boat, we store it. We find a place to store it instead of storing it in our garage and leaving our cars in the parking lot, or just storing. I just think that it just has to get to a point. It just kind of a pet peeve of mine, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine. But that's my view. I think he's got a good case. Classic cars, we've done that in the past for other people, especially on the south side, haven't we, Mel?
Yeah.
So that's just my thought.
Well, I understand where Cindy's at on this. I'm not a big fan of carports, not because of carports, but because of exactly what Mr. Raines said. A lot of these contractors don't explain it correctly. Permits are needed for carports, period. They are a structure. It doesn't matter if it's got sides or not. So I get a little irritated when, and LCI is a reputable business. I think they exhibit at the state fair, if I'm correct. So maybe the city needs, and I know you can't educate everybody, people buy these things online or through Menards, but if you've got reputable contractors or people listed in the phone book, just send them a nice little reminder, permits are required in Des Moines for building structures. If that's the case, if you need a structure for a carport, nod yes or no. Yeah. But I think Mr. Raines presented himself very clearly. I think maybe he understands now too. He's kind of built out. I think he's using his property probably to the maximum here. But Andy Clark is the president of the South Park Neighborhood Association. He's a really good guy. And when I see a card here that says that Andy went around directly to visit with the neighbors and all said he was a great neighbor, they didn't object to the variance, and Andy says, I see his property is well maintained and attractive. In a case like this, I'm going to lean toward he's a pretty good guy. He takes care of his place. I maybe wouldn't use this as an example of you know, residential lot planning or anything like that, but I'd kind of think in this case I'm inclined to grant the variance.
Any other thoughts?
I'm going to support it too, just for everything that Mel said. I think that we have a little more challenge here because he doesn't have a very big backyard. Those lots, if you look at the map that Eric showed, when you look at the other yards like to back up to it, they're much bigger. So what he's asking for is really not any different than what we see other people ask for. His challenge is that's just a very small backyard. And so I think we need to, you know, consider that. I'm going to support it in this case. I agree. I think we've got a lot of buildings there, but golly, you know, if we've got a good neighbor, let's keep him. Let's do everything we can to keep him in the neighborhood. I'd rather not see the driveway there, just because Eric said, you know, they would rather not see the driveway there. I'd rather keep it green space. He only takes cars in and out of there a few times a year. I'm going to support it, but without the driveway.
I don't think you really cared
He
if the
doesn't
driveway
really
was
care.
there or not.
Driveway makes no difference with that.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
What happens when he
I think
That goes with
the
it.
thing stays.
Yep.
They get the variance stays with the property. Now, I mean, we've done it in the past. If he sells, we can make it a stipulation that they have to take it down, but I don't know if that's warranted in this case.
That would be fine with me if that's a stipulation.
But then we've got to have a way to record that. I don't know if we impose on staff that has to go on a deed, or it just goes in the file and somebody's got a good, like, realtor would have to check with the city and see if there's any.
I think it's
Encumbrances.
doable. I like that idea of just making, he's okay with it.
Sue Ann, what, is there an enforcement issue that?
But if he builds a firewall to keep it up, that'll be hard to take the thing down, won't it? If that's what we're after.
Chair Board, Sue Ann Donovan, Zoning Enforcement. It would be difficult to track, not impossible. We could request the owner to record something with the recorder that would appear on the title opinion, that the structure needs to be removed.
I think he's,
That would be the easiest way to track it.
okay,
Yeah.
all right.
There could be a concern the next person gets it, and even without a paved driveway, they're like, hey, I got another place, and then suddenly we got the kid's car coming out of there going to school every day or something, bouncing
I think
curves.
Mr. Raines is in agreement with
Yeah.
that, too.
I like that idea.
Okay. What do you think of that, Brooke? All right, I hear a motion then? Because staff's recommendation is denial, so.
Do you want to do it?
Well, I'll try it here.
All right.
I'd make a motion to approve the requested variances, subject to the appellant recording an exception, subject to the appellant recording on his deed that the carport structure and all footings and related building to that has to be removed upon any sale or transfer of the property from his name.
Yeah, we could just put that as a condition in the decision and then require him to record the decision.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Now, let me ask,
Yeah, so as a condition, he would have to remove the structure and all footings upon any sale or transfer, and staff will record that.
Then we'll have him record that.
And then we'll have him record that on his deed at his cost and his effort.
We'll hold the permit till he gives us evidence that he's recorded the decision.
Yes, okay. He has to provide evidence that he's recorded our decision.
there we go.
Okay.
Mel,
And he'd have to meet appropriate building code for the existing structure, if that includes firewall or improving any footings for the current,
Yeah, and you can put that as a condition, we're gonna
Yeah.
enforce that.
As a condition, the building, he still has to meet building code for the existing structure.
and I'm not, you said and exceptions, so the exception is for the paving. Do we want to remove that?
Let's see, well, we're granting the exception that he doesn't need it? Is that right?
That
How's that listed?
No, you'd probably deny the
deny
exception
the exception.
if you
So you
didn't
just
want,
accept.
if you didn't want to allow the paving.
So the
The existing
exception was
paving?
only for the
Yeah.
driveway.
Your motion right now is to accept the variances and exceptions, so I
Okay.
would just change it to, with
Yeah,
all
all
the
right, so
wording.
just the variances.
Yeah,
Okay,
and you're good
yeah.
with that?
yeah,
Just give me a variance for the building.
Yep.
And no driveway.
Right.
right.
That's fine.
So then we're denying the exception, is that correct?
Right.
Okay,
You got that written down, Bert?
that's not too convoluted. It's not as good
But, you know,
as,
this is kind of unique
not as
situation.
good as Tom would put it
I
out
take
there.
care, make sure the guy's getting what he's looking for. Any further discussions? What's been moved by Mel, do I have your second?
I'll second that
Okay.
motion.
Moved and second. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Those opposed, motion carries 4-1. So get your permit, and we'll be driving by checking that out. Thank you. Item 10 is an exception at 1710 12th Street.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, item number 10 is two appeals to retain an existing carport structure that has been constructed on the south side of the building. The subject property is a single-family house in the King Irving neighborhood. It's just on the west side of 12th Street, north of Washington Avenue. Here's a photo of the carport as it's been constructed.
Needs building permit.
It was constructed without a building permit. Then they came in and was issued a building permit, but the building permit, and I'll show you shortly, showed that it had to be at least 5 feet from the property line. During the inspection, it was discovered it was less than the 5 feet from the property line. They also made some changes to it to try to meet the building code. They're still deficient on the building code, but they have been working towards meeting the building code. Here's a photo that the applicant submitted that shows they need the entire width of the carport. It shows that if they made it more narrow, the doors wouldn't be able to open, or if they had to put a firewall on the side, the doors wouldn't be able to open. Then this photo is looking back towards the street. So you can see the proximity of the carport to the house on the subject property, or on the property adjacent to the south. They're about 2.5 feet from the property line and about 6 or 7 feet from that house itself. Like I said, here's the building permit that was issued. It was back in February of 2011. And it was issued for a roughly 10.5 foot by 30.5 foot carport that had to be at least 5 feet from the property line, as well as fire-rated wall and then frost footings required since it's attached to the primary dwelling. They did get, as you can see, this permit expired in February. They have received an extension, so they still have an open permit pending. Here's the consent map. We had one card come back in opposition. There's no comments on it, but it's from the property behind it that fronts 13th Street. Again, right now they have a 10.5 foot wide carport that's 2.5 feet. So in order to meet the 5 foot zoning setback, they would have to reduce it by 2.5 feet, which would leave them with about 8 feet of carport. Staff doesn't believe that the proposed carport as it's constructed is in conformance with the character of the neighborhood. We feel it's too close to the house to the south. We feel there's opportunity to either build a carport or garage in the rear yard area, maybe not attached to the house, but in the rear yard. And it could either be accessed from this existing driveway or from the existing alley that runs along the back side of the property. If the board does allow them to keep this carport, they still will have to provide the frost depth footings and either provide a fire-rated wall or get a no-build easement on a portion of the property to the south so that they can provide that minimum 5 foot width where no building would ever be constructed.
Because we don't meet the 5 foot either, do we? Between structures, there's not 5 feet, just shy of that, I bet.
So they have 5 feet between structures, but we still require either a fire-rated wall or a no-build easement from the property to the south, just to be sure that that property to the south knows they can't build anything within 5 feet of
Okay.
that carport structure.
Okay.
How, I'm sorry, I'll wait till you
Oh, I
finish.
was just going to say, we've recommended denial of it.
Okay.
For the house that is next door, how far is that house from their fence?
It's about 3 feet, give or
I
take.
think
Is
I'm
there
being
that
generous there. It
much?
looks like about 2.
Yeah,
And the property line is the fence or thereabouts?
they're about, yeah, they would need a survey.
So these guys got 3 or 4 feet here, and then there's 2 feet maybe there.
If they were to leave 5 feet, they would have to build this carport. They would have to come off a couple feet right in the middle of their cement, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Is that, what would they have to do? Tear up the cement, put their footings in, and then pour a little bit of cement?
Yeah,
But,
they would have to, cut out enough cement where they can dig the frost depth footings for the supports for the carport.
If they were really savvy, they'd dig them and slide under the existing pavement just to shade and still make the pour, but.
and can you make a
not the
driveway
building
go,
inspector.
right, the driveway doesn't have to be 5 feet?
Yeah,
Normally.
The driveway could be up to the property line.
It can be up to the property
Yeah,
line.
just no structure.
And how close can that structure be? I know the permit said 5, but
5 feet, yeah.
can you go up to 2?
If it meets building code,
Is it-
and if this board grants the.
Okay.
Is it
exception
5
to
feet
allow-
because it's attached to the main dwelling
It-
versus 2 foot for an accessory
If it
structure?
were in the rear yard, it could be 2 feet, but because it's
Ah.
within the side yard, it's 5 feet. Usually, you know, this is zone residential, we usually have like a 7 or 8 foot side yard setback, but this is a lot of record, which
Got
just
it.
says 10% of the lot width is what the side yard setback is. So on a 50-foot wide lot, 10% is 5 feet, which is how.
Can you give us a better idea of the lot layout with the structures? Like on that last one, you had like the house numbers and the little black and white line map. Do you have something like that for this one? Because you mentioned there might be room in a rear yard to make a garage. Here we go.
Yeah, this was actually attached to their building permit, which is
Okay.
only needed the 5 foot here. You can see.
So what you're saying is they could extend the driveway and come around the back and build a garage there that could
Right,
either access to the alley or still from 12th Street.
correct.
Are there any garages in that block at all?
It looks like the property just to the south has a
Hmm.
garage.
So let me ask this, if this carport were detached, just like what the gentleman before us had, if it were detached, could it be over, it could be over closer to the,
No, it would still need the 5 foot setback, since it's in the side yard area.
okay,
Which
Right.
is
We got to be in rear yard before we get down to the 2 foot.
correct.
Okay.
It'd have to be behind the rear wall of the
Okay.
house. Then it could drop down to 2 feet.
That is a slanted roof, so is there any gutters, downspouts?
That was my question.
I jump in before me.
It doesn't look like we have that.
No. I know your recommendation is denial, so,
Yeah, and you can see, this was the initial carport that they had built. You can see it didn't have as much structural integrity is the word, but the support posts weren't as thick on the original one. And they came back and rebuilt it to try to meet building code, so it's more sturdy than it was, but it's still deficient with regard to the building code for the fire rated wall and for the frost footing, so.
but they still didn't put footings in, correct?
Correct.
And how would you, if that's open, what kind of a firewall would you put in?
You would have to put in
a wall.
a solid wall with
So-
limited openings on the side.
So then it would almost look like a garage. You know, all you'd have to do
Right.
is put the backside on
Yeah.
and then you'd have a garage.
Yeah.
And there was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So if this were allowed, they would have to close in that other side
That
with a
side.
firewall.
Yeah.
And was there a building permit taken out initially,
No.
but secondarily there was after
Yeah.
the first violation was noticed?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And at that time, the building permit was issued and made it clear they did need to be 5 feet. You know,
Okay.
from these are always within, you know, they're not exact, these footprints, but
So even with the issuance of the permit, what I'm going to call the rebuild, we still have the issues with footings and
yeah.
where it sits and all that? Okay.
And that's a 50-foot wide lot, but the house looks newer. When was the house built? Was this,
It was,
Fill in the
yeah,
I believe in
infill housing?
or maybe there was an old house there and,
Toward now.
yeah, I thought I had that. I know it was a Habitat for Humanity house that was sold to these people. I want to say in the early 2000s, but
And maybe the
so it
owner.
was built by Habitat.
yeah, here it is.
For our time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
We
built
wouldn't allow that
in
without a garage.
2004, and these people bought it in 2005.
Okay. So they've been there 7 years now.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Can you show us the aerial quickly?
Sure.
I can't see much with the orange line, but I'm guessing the driveway does not extend past where the car sits now and that side of the house, so. So if they built a garage, they'd have to pave to the back yet.
Yep.
One final one, Bert. Can you put a picture of the house back up? So I don't see any gutters on the,
Yeah. There is a gutter here.
okay, now go over to here. Yeah, is there a gutter for rainwater there?
Boy, it sure doesn't look
I
like
don't think I see one.
Might have had to take them off if they reconfigured
Aha,
it.
good point. So then the sheet runoff from the one half of the house, a lot of that comes onto the carport and then runs off right next to the property line too. Okay.
Any other questions? Thanks, Bert. Applicant, representative of the applicant?
My name is Hibo Jama, and
Trying to pull that microphone down a little closer. There we go.
my name is Hibo Jama from 1710 12th Street. And at the beginning, I didn't know I was required to get a permit. The person who was building for me, he said, you don't need a permit. So I went ahead and we built it, and then the city found out, and I got a letter. So I got the permit, and then the first one, we didn't pass it because the carport was attached on the where the gutter was.
Yeah.
So we had to take it out, and then we built for the second time. And when we were building, in fact, when we even dug the holes, we called the city and they inspected, and they said it's okay. So we put the concrete and everything. So after we attached again, they came and then they said you have to be 5 feet away back from the other property. So as you see, we can't get in and out of the car if we put a drywall. I'm sorry. So we built for the second time, and we were trying to comply with the city, and we will request an exemption for this.
Well, there's some things we can do and some we can't. We can't, the city code overrules whatever we do. But so if you have to have footings and you have to have a firewall, that's something we have no control over. But yes.
We do have footings.
Okay. I mean, you don't have to convince us. It's just, it's inspectors.
When they called me over, they did have a permit, and the inspector came in and okayed it, told them to build it. They did have a footing. Matter of fact, they had 3 footings, 12 inches wide, 4 feet deep for the footing, and they got 2x6 posts coming up for the rafters. And when we built it, they said it was okay.
I don't know.
And then we went down to the building inspector to give the final inspection. And then now we came from the building to the zoning. When the zoning said, well, they was the 5 feet, and then the building inspector said, well, we already okayed it. We're giving the building inspector to build it. Go ahead and let them do it. And then the zoning inspector came out to the house. And that's when they came out and said, well, you got the 5 feet variance. You have to build a firewall. And I said, okay, they said, in order to build a firewall, you have to get an engineer. So we going by everything that the building inspection said. So we went down and paid $100 and something to get an engineer to design a firewall. Then we got the firewall designed to apply with the city. Then the city said, well, no, you have to go to this board right here in order to get it approved. And we're trying to apply with everything that the city is requiring, and I don't understand why they give them the building permit to build it, have the inspector come out and to inspect it before they constructed it. The building inspector said build it. They didn't say nothing about the garage. The building inspector said build it. So we built it according to the building inspector. And we got the footings and everything there. Then we were getting ready to get the final inspection. And when we got the final inspection, then the zoning came in. And so all these, the first time they said they had to tear it down because they did not get a building permit. So they went and got the building permit, had an inspector, and the inspector told them exactly how to do the process. And so we applied with the process. Well, I didn't come in this, another contractor did. But when I came in, I was trying to take over where the other contractor came in. And then I talked to the building inspector myself, mouth to mouth, and said, this is all right. And they said, well, you should have got a zoning first. Mm-hmm. Then I said, well, you didn't apply for this. Okay, so all this is transpiring. You got the footings down, you got the structure built, and now the only thing was looking for is to they didn't have the 5 foot they said you had to build a firewall. And I said, no, and I said, okay, fine. What's your criteria for the firewall? They said you had to get an engineer. So I went and got the engineer. I'm doing everything, every process they tell me to do. And then as soon as I got the engineer, now they said we have to go through you. So one thing we were trying to say, we did all these steps in order to get the carport up. Only thing we asked them is allow us to build a firewall. That way, because from the house to the structure is 8 feet. From the fence to is 5 feet. That's how come we wanted to build a firewall. So that's what it's about.
Okay. Now,
Could we just have him clarify what his name is? Is he a friend or the contractor?
My name is Philip. Philip Spivey.
okay,
Philip Henry Spivey. I live at 1246 15th Street,
okay.
Des Moines, Iowa.
Are
54310.
are you just a friend, or were you the contractor that did the building?
No. I am a pastor.
Okay.
And see, I built
So
my
you
own,
are a friend.
Huh?
You are a friend.
Yeah. I built my own garage,
Okay.
and I do a lot of construction for their family,
Right.
and I built a garage for their friend, and I
Right.
built a number of garages for different
Yeah.
people. And so when they started, they said, I wish I got you first time. I said, you should have
Okay.
called me the first time.
Okay.
Then we wouldn't be going through this change.
Right. So you didn't help with the direct construction on this?
I didn't help
Okay.
with anything. I'm trying to.
You're just narrating the story here a little bit.
narrating the story.
Okay.
Knowing I'm coming back to build a firewall
Okay.
and to attach the roof
Got it.
to the firewall.
All right, thank you, Philip.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mel. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you both very much. Anybody else here to speak in support? Is there anybody here to speak in opposition? Any last questions for staff?
Yes. All right, Mr. Spivey just said, well, I got permission to build this, but then I wasn't told about this. Now, when you come down to file a building permit, you draw a plan, right, or a sketch? And at that time, are there discussions about front yard, side yard, and rear yard
Yeah,
setbacks?
and you can see on the building permit itself, it said it in two places. You need to be 5 feet from the property line, and then
Okay.
required setbacks from the side, 5 feet. So-
Okay. And in general, like you just did in 10 seconds, when a permit's issued, is that issued on the spot? And then they point at it and kind of explain that?
Yeah,
Okay.
they issue the permit, and then they, when they've done some construction, they'll call for an inspection, and the inspector will come out. I was just looking at the
Okay.
inspection record, and they've had several inspections. I know one of the things, the main issues they have is that the beam above is undersized, so
As
they'll
well.
have to
Okay. Okay.
do some,
And I know a lot of this is confusing to people who haven't gone through it before, but I just wanted to make sure that it was
yeah,
clearly listed on their building permit
yeah.
what the setbacks were. Okay.
So, but if the board would grant it to remain it as is, they would just have to, like,
The
comply with the
Firewall.
building code, which, you know,
Right.
could,
Okay.
Brooke?
Where's the property line?
it's roughly 2.5 feet from, they don't have it submitted a survey that would show exactly where it is.
So if I was the owner and that fence was there, I would probably assume that is the property line.
Right, and the fence is about 3 feet.
The pastor said it's 5 feet.
I don't think it's 5 feet.
So when the city goes and inspects, do they tell them where the property line is?
No,
Well, then how do you know that it's 5 feet if you don't know where the property line is?
we would require a survey if there is
Well,
some
how
question.
does the inspector
Yeah.
know it's 5 feet if he doesn't know where the property
Right.
line is?
Well, you know, and the inspector might have found where the pin is and been able to,
Do you have that in the notes?
no. But we know it's less than 5 feet, so we know it needs relief of the zoning.
On that permit, just a little side note, that this carport is valued at $11,700.
That's according to.
I got a hell of a
yeah.
deal in my garage then, so just
Right.
try to put things in perspective. Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Bert. Close the public portion, go to board decision.
I'm having a lot of trouble with this because I just don't see how it's gonna work. I mean, even if they put a firewall up, I don't know that they could open the car door. I just don't think there's enough room.
Well, that's why I asked if they could go up, right up to 2.5, up to 2 feet. I don't know if that's going to create a lot. If we need you, we'll get you.
I mean, I just,
Actually, it's closed, so we can't bring you up right now, unless somebody asks, so.
I mean, to me, the building permit's pretty clear. You know, you need to be 5 feet, and it looks like it was built less than 5 feet, so,
Well, and that's why they're here for the exception.
yeah.
So,
I'm really struggling with it.
well, I keep looking at this because it is kind of a unique situation. What I don't understand is you got a driveway there, and there never has been a garage or anything. So that just seemed kind of odd, and that looks like it's
You're
been
not
there.
required to build a garage when you build a house in the city of Des Moines.
That's where we come in, that's right. And the neighbor next door didn't object. And it is one of those, would say, Habitat for Humanity houses. So these people have lived there for 7 years. I just think I agree with the struggle that you've got, but I think the set of circumstances are pretty unique. Like Brooke says, it's pretty tight there on the property line. We don't even know where the property line is, so.
I'd like to make it work for them, but, I mean, they're still gonna have to get through building codes.
Sure.
They're still gonna have to come in and put in footings, they're gonna have to do a firewall, they're gonna have to do all those things. I'm not sure it can be done, but
Then, I'd say then
that's not for us to
there we go.
decide.
All right.
Mel, your thoughts?
Again, it's one of these things, unless you go through this or you have a real understanding how some of these processes work, it might be confusing a first time around. It sounds like they were trying the best they could. If we are to retain this thing, obviously it'd have to comply with building permit. And I'd like to see some gutters installed on it and then direct the outflow parallel to the driveway, either, front or backyard, so it's not getting into the house next door there. House next door needs its own maintenance on its own soffit up there, I see, so. But I think trying to make this work is better than ripping everything down
And giving them nothing.
and wind up with nothing.
And the thing I look at.
If we had
not a-
objections,
Yeah.
if we had a neighboring problem or something, I might feel a little differently. I'm not carte blanche on approving carports.
No. And we're at an exception level. If it was a variance, then maybe I might take a different look at it.
That's a good point.
Brooke, you got any thoughts?
Well, I mean, you'd have to put the firewall up because
Yeah.
we have no way around that. So why don't we just let them go ahead and put the firewall up if that's what they want to do? If they can't comply, we have no say over the building code.
Right.
I don't know if it was a misunderstanding or miscommunication or what, but
Sure sounds like.
it seems like they tried to do the right thing in several instances.
Yeah, I think the same thing. Cindy, what's your thoughts?
Agree.
So let's put a motion out here because the staff is recommending denial, so.
Someone else's turn.
Well, I'll put the motion out then. I would propose that we grant them the exception of 2.5 feet less than the minimum required 5-foot side yard setback, and the exception of 4 feet less than the minimum required 15 feet of total side yard setback, and include Mel's
Yeah,
stipulation of-
I'd second that then with the friendly amendment that they have to include a gutter and downspout on the carport with discharge to parallel to the driveway, front or rear yard.
Okay.
And they should probably put the other portion of the house roof with a gutter too then.
Let's do that.
That's just a good recommendation for maintenance.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Motion carries 5-0. So you've got one step out of the way, so we're going to drive by and check it out. We want to see you get that thing put together. Thank you.
Okay.
Item 11 is a variance at 3850 Merle Hay Road.
You bet, you too.
I'm going to hand this around. This was a communication that we got after we sent out the staff report from the applicant. You want additional copies? And we have revised our staff report based on this. This is in response to after we sent out the staff report, so. The parcel in question is one of the parcels within the Merle Hay Mall campus complex. The tower, as you can see, is at the very northwest corner of this. It doesn't have what we consider occupant frontage for the earning of signage under the sign provisions for C4 and for C2, which is referenced in the C4. The applicant wants two signs essentially. One would be on the interior side of the mall, away from the public view from the street, near the primary entrance to the tower offices, and that's a very, as you can see, a smaller sign. And then the other signage that they're looking at is something that's viewable then from Merle Hay off the east side of the building, where it projects up above behind the main floor of the mall. This is actually a photo then of what you see. You know, this is, I think, the Applebee's parking lot or something in this area. So you can see the distance that it is away. If that was actually direct frontage on the mall, it's set so far back it basically maximizes any kind of bonuses that would be earned for sign area. This request is well within what it would earn had it actually had the building occupant frontage. One of the concerns we did have was the actual aesthetics of the sign itself. Generally, when we see signs mounted on buildings in this fashion, not like a typical strip frontage or, you know, canopy, or we want to see kind of the channel letters or individualized letters.
Where they pop out.
With no background.
Right.
And this is basically going to be an unlit sign, is my understanding. So they've chosen to have a contrasting background. So if it was channel letters, you'd probably see those done in a dark color, and probably lit if they wanted to do channel letters. But in this case, they're just proposing a sign with a dark background and the contrasting letters. So that was basically the one thing that we wanted to see. We felt that there was really a justification, given that economically, to keep the building viable, it needs some exposure. And we just wanted to make sure that was done in a character with the rest of the mall.
Right.
Which, if you look at the other buildings, you know, you see channel letters, although even like the Staples is a lit background, and maybe that's another, you know, option the board might want to consider. But for the most part, we're seeing the individual channel letters off the side of the mall as the predominant character.
But Eric, to your knowledge, this is pretty much a daytime business, right?
Yeah, it's a public service. You know, and again, when the tower was built, it really wasn't meant for heavy traffic from the general public. It was meant to be an office. Right. You know, an office building. Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't even old enough to know, but I barely recall the mall being open and not covered. Yes. And this building was probably there and actually had more exposure.
For 30 years, most people forgot there's an office building there.
So way back in the original, when it was built, it probably actually had more exposure to Merle Hay than it does now. So certainly is at some disadvantage.
Okay. So your staff recommendation number 2 is for the individual channel letter design yet? Not lit,
yeah, we're
but
staying with that. Now
channel
they've got some arguments, and certainly the board can consider those on their own merits.
How long have they been there, Eric?
How long has Proteus been there?
Yeah, do you
You know,
know?
I don't think I have an answer for you, that hopefully they will.
I noticed that if Proteus moves out, that sign's going to stay there.
Well, if you know, identification signs have to identify the business that
Sure.
they advertise, so.
They're supposed to go down within 6 months if the business
So-
isn't there, right?
You know, if it was Merle Hay Office Tower, yeah, it could stay there forever.
Okay.
Right.
If it identifies a particular business, then there is a tie to the identification.
Is there a reason you didn't have this on consent agenda? Looks pretty straightforward.
Mainly because we believe we
condition?
might get some resistance to the recommendation of
From the appellant?
going to the
Okay,
channel letter
okay.
system, yeah.
All right.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Eric. Applicant, representative of the applicant?
I'm Tom Wheeler. I'm with Signs Plus. And I guess
Need an address.
1410 Southeast Deal, Des Moines. And we've been working with the mall and through the mall, through Proteus for probably about 6 months now. Because working up to this point, you're asking about what had happened if Proteus left. They were leaving because of this. And so through the leasing agents, they negotiated this signage for them prior to the board's approval. So if this falls through, they're moving. Okay, so they've got a 5-year lease that's signed pending signage approval. Now we've got about 120 hours worth of design time and different angles of viewing that would meet within a budget for a nonprofit that works on grants.
100.
Okay, so definitely the first design was what's mentioned as one that's suggested, but it was cost prohibitive in the size, and just because they are only open during day hours is that we tried to go with something that would maximize their viewability and stay within a budget. And how they costed this out through the mall and the leasing agents was through a price per square foot on a 5-year lease. Okay? So, you know, if we go with the suggested price, we've already done like probably, 15 different proposals with costs to get down to one that would get the most viewability for the lowest amount of cost. Now, how we arrived at this with the backer is that we did have just individual letters up on the building, but to see the individual letters that high, that far away, you can see the picture, it's not distinguishable. When you put a backer against that white building and then put another color on top of that, these are raised letters, by the way. They're not,
Okay.
channel letters are 5 inches deep. These are a 1/4 inch deep, so it's still a dimensional letter. But, you know, to make a 5-inch depth letter, it's not going to make any difference, you know, 65 feet in the air, you know, from us, but it definitely will on a cost side. So we ended up with a 1/4 inch letter, which could keep the cost down and the viewability higher. So we've got a 4-foot tall backer, and it's not a cabinet sign. So I heard reference to it being a cabinet or a box sign. It's not a cabinet sign at all. It's a dark aluminum backer with raised letters on top of it that are painted white. So yeah, we've went through some due diligence to try to keep those people in the mall. You know, the mall, the Merle Hay Mall is working as hard as they can with the budget that they're allowed and the clientele that they have there to maintain the tenants. It's very competitive out there, and you well know that, is that, you know, the western suburbs, and, you know, this probably won't make any favor with you, but I'm a West Des Moines Chamber ambassador.
Sure.
And there is, you know, they have their own economic development people to attract people from downtown and Des Moines. And
What are the names of those people?
yeah. So I sort of
Adjustment hit list here.
yeah. So, you know, the reality.
We have
of the
our
thing-
own too.
The reality of it is that the leasing agents are doing everything they can to maintain their base, and these people truly don't want to move.
Right.
They don't, because their clientele, you know, are language challenged.
Sure.
And, you know, to go through what they go through, I can't believe that they even talked to the mall about, you know, staying on with the lease, because, you know, and probably this is their issue, not ours, but not everybody in their office is bilingual. And so to give directions multiple times to every person,
Right.
it's just, I couldn't imagine. And so we did everything within our power, and you know, we're not doing the sign for free, but we've got 120 hours of design time we did for free, just to try and come up with something that would fit in their budget. And this is what we arrived at. And so anything outside of this, you know, the 5-year lease that was just signed goes away, and we're going to have to go back to the drawing board. So.
Okay. Tom, the way that building is constructed, is it kind of like a vertical rib thing where, you know, the windows are in an inset, and then like the lighter tan, does that stick out further? Kind of a zigzag effect on the facade? It's not all one flat facade, is it, across that building?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Where
So
the band,
that's just
where the
painting.
band, we show the band, and it's not on the, you've got the picture, but we
Okay.
show the band, that is a flat band. So there's nothing that's rigid behind it that's,
Okay.
you know, that,
Because what I'm getting at, if the building facade was not even, it would be difficult to set the individual letters. I see what the staff's talking
no,
about.
it wouldn't
No.
be difficult to do. It would
Okay.
just be
All right.
cost
This is
prohibitive for
just
the
more,
client.
yeah, I
You know,
gotcha.
so
Okay,
that was our first choice. You know, we went there,
okay.
did everything, costed it out, plus the fact of, you know, if you,
Okay.
they don't need lit letters because they're not open at
Well,
night.
how about just a proposal to the mall with big lit letters on a sign that says Merle Hay Tower, and then fill it all up, and then we couldn't miss it even at night. All right, that's all I've got.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Is there anybody else here to speak in support? Anyone else? Anybody here to speak in opposition? Any last questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public portion, then go to board decision. I'm getting the same.
Mr. Chair, I'd move recommendation to approve the variance, subject to staff item number 1 and strike item number 2.
Second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Nice presentation. Good job. Item 12 is a special permit at 1207 East Aurora.
Item number 12 is a request for a home occupation, a home-based business, and it would allow retention of a mobile welding business. The business really only operates on the property for storage and for the office functions. According to the applicant, they do all of their actual welding and assembly or work related to the business off-site at the particular job sites. The subject property is a single-family house on the south side of East Aurora Avenue, just to the west of the East 14th Street commercial corridor. The property includes a single-family house with a fairly recent addition onto the front, and then a detached, I believe it's 22 by 44 garage in the rear yard that is used for storage. Here's a photo of the property. The garage is at the end of the driveway. This is another photo that the applicant provided that shows his mobile welding trailer, as well as his work truck for the business. And then here's the consent map. We had mostly favorable comments. However, the two to the south, including the one adjacent to the south, are concerned about the proposal. Staff recommends approval of the home occupation. We felt that so long as all of the work is conducted off-site and the only work related to the business on-site is just the storage of materials and office use, we felt that the business would have relatively minimal impacts. So we've recommended approval subject to 2 conditions. One, that no outdoor storage of equipment related to the business may occur on the premise. And number 2, any equipment related to the business any equipment related to the business except for the pickup trucks or vans used for personal use must be stored inside a building and limited to no more than 50% of the area of that accessory building. Any questions?
So this basically says he wouldn't be doing any welding on the site itself. He wouldn't be doing any repairs or
Correct.
or manufacturing.
And in the 2 comment cards we got back, they both say that work is being done outside.
Oh.
And so I would maybe let the applicant explain
Okay.
what work they're referring to.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thanks, Bert. Applicant or representative of the applicant?
Hello. My name is Paul Credelli. I live at 1207 East Aurora Avenue. Been a resident in Des Moines about 8 years. I have a portable welding service which allows me to go to job sites and do work. I'm a certified welder. I'm insured. Otherwise, this is a part-time gig. I'm employed 30 hours a week at a job. I own other machining and equipment that's stored in my garage that I use for building my equipment. I do a very unique process. I only do aluminum, which is a very specialized. I do not advertise for this service. I market it to businesses that can use me. And I don't intend to advertise that, just that would attract work that I don't want anything to do with and would create a problem in the neighborhood. The reason with my equipment and what I build, my intent is to, when I built my house, I started out with the worst house in the neighborhood. I built it over about 4 years, greatly improved the neighborhood, and my intent is to pay that off in the next 7 years and then buy a building and start a small business. I do not store anything out in my yard, otherwise visible to the public. I don't have traffic, potential customers in and out of my driveway. I just finished building a truck. That was the last big project I had. My welder is currently trailer mounted. I built that truck with the intent of truck mounting it, eliminating one piece. I'd like to point out I made significant improvements to the property I live in. My house was a local eyesore when I bought it. I spent 4 years reconstructing it. It's now a very attractive home. I've brought the value of it up. Even with the big hits we've taken the last couple of years, it's still worth about $80,000 more than when I bought it. I also purchased the house next door, so I'll never have 6 college students live next door to me again. And I've started improving it. I intend to do an addition on that in a couple of years. That would make it a much nicer home. I also have a trailer park right across the street from my house with a driveway that lines up with mine that has about 200 cars pull in and out a day. I'm not sure I'm going with this. I don't bother anybody. You know, if I bother anybody in Des Moines, let me know, it'll get corrected. The only person that I bother is the person that lives behind me, which I cannot seem to get away from. And I'm sure he's here to speak against me. But that's all I really have.
Okay. Questions?
Mr. Credelli, do you have any problem with the staff recommendations, the items 1 and 2, about how you'd store your vehicles and what percentage of your
Absolutely not.
other structure you
They've
use?
been to my house, they've looked it over, they've seen the situation.
Okay.
If they have a problem, tell me what it is, it'll get
All right,
corrected.
but if we would grant this, if we'd grant this conditional use or this special permit, you're okay with complying with what they've suggested here, items 1 and 2?
Absolutely. The only thing I've got in question at this point, I have one industrial trailer that I built a year ago. I have a mini excavator that I've been redoing that's almost done. It'll be done in about 2 weeks, and it will be leaving the city, so that won't be around.
Okay. Yeah, because otherwise it looks like with this condition, that normally wouldn't be allowed to be stored, so.
Really?
It says no outdoor storage of equipment
Oh,
related to the
outdoor.
business.
Okay, yeah, no
Yes.
problem, no problem.
Yes, yes, okay. And by the way, there were 12 cards in support of you and only one against, so that's, or two. Oh, sorry, there's the other one. Still, it's 6-1, so.
Any other questions? I think you're done anyway. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, that was good. Anybody else here to speak in support?
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Hodges, and I live at 1221 East Aurora, and I would be card number 13, but decided to come down.
All right, cool.
I've lived in the neighborhood long enough to know that Paul is definitely has had a positive impact on the area. You know, the trailer court that he talks about across the street, I'm sure that if you asked everybody there or in the neighborhood that would love to have Paul occupying all those trailers because there's a big difference.
Okay.
He keeps his place up. He doesn't have people come and go in all hours. He's helped us get rid of standing water in the area. And to put a sour face on that by not letting him park a trailer in his garage would be just, it would be unheard of, I think. So I'm just here to say that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else here to speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition?
My name is Raymond Newell, 1022 Trish Avenue, Des Moines. My property abuts this one on the south. I can.
You want to pull that picture down and point to your property? Right over there. Directly behind?
Directly behind.
Okay.
This guy consistently works on everything. He works on power boats. He's got them there all the time. He works on motorcycles. Seen cars and trucks in there. I can hear chop saw, grinders, hammers throughout the day and the evening at times. He works a lot at night in the garage. It's a wood frame building. I've seen welder flash come out of that building. Like I say, it's a wood frame building. Spark gets that thing on fire. My garage is only about 10 or 11 feet away from it. Like I say, there's just a lot of traffic. He's also got a backhoe and skid loader that he uses for various things, whatever, I don't know. He's got a trailer to transport them on. And one other thing of note, not too many years ago, my neighbor to the west thought he was an auto mechanic. Tried to get him to stop. He wouldn't. Well, one morning he come out of his house, went to work on a car, got a gas tank on fire, burned his garage down. I don't need my garage burnt down from as close as I am to this operation here. I guess that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Anybody else here to speak in opposition? You got 3 minutes then for final wrap-up. Might have a few questions too.
Okay, sure.
You heard your neighbor to the rear, so.
Pardon?
You heard what your neighbor said.
Sure did. Yeah, 91 to 2000, I was the lead motorcycle safety instructor at DMAC. I was also service manager at Zooks Harley Davidson. Even though I don't ride Harleys, I rode sport bikes. I did used to work on some motorcycles. My son, when he turned 15, I realized if I wasn't careful, he was going to be just like me. I haven't owned a motorcycle since he was 15. He's 23. I have not touched a bike in 5 or 6 years. I admit, I think in 2002, I brought 4 of the little Honda training bikes home from DMAC and serviced them.
Okay.
I did used to do some mechanical work. I don't do any of that stuff anymore. So, got any other questions for me? I'll be glad to answer.
Well, the one question is saying that according to your neighbor, you're doing some welding in the garage?
Yeah, I build all my own equipment. That fancy truck that I've got, I built that in my, I did everything but paint it there. I sent it out to a paint shop for that. But yeah, that brand new truck is actually an 88. One-ton dually, start at 50,000. I bought that truck for $500. I've got 8,000 in it. It's brand new. And yes, it's a very fancy, and I did all the metal work and built it in my garage.
Okay.
I don't own a skid loader. I do own a mini excavator, which I bought very cheap and rebuilt with my equipment. I bought that excavator because the house next door to me is on septic. Cost $10,000 to hook up to the sewer. I can do all of it myself, but hook it up now. I got a plumber across the street that'll do it for $1,000. I'll sell the piece of equipment. It's just a math game to me.
But the excavator is for your own personal use, it's not for any business use?
Correct.
Yeah, so...
And it's never, and it's been outside a couple of times.
Right.
If you saw my yard, yeah, it makes the yard work a lot more fun.
Right.
I've done some pretty incredible things.
Right.
The city stopped by and looked at it, and they were very impressed.
There's a big difference in having equipment for your own personal use versus storing or using equipment on your property for a business use. So, you know, if you wanted to work on motorcycles with your son all the time, that's fine. But if you start selling them or repairing them for others for, you know, a business, that'd be a different thing.
He decided to be an electrician, so rather than the danger of motorcycles, he's sticking his
right,
yeah. Panels and
yeah.
so.
Three-phase, all that fun stuff. Yeah.
Any other questions?
It's a good skill, though.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any last questions for staff? And Sue Ann, I think maybe you want to...
Chair, Board, Sue Ann Donovan, Zoning Enforcement Office. In light of the comments from the neighbor, if we could amend the staff recommendations to be very clear that there shouldn't be any auto repair or conducting business of welding on the site, I would appreciate it.
But he can do his own personal.
Do his own personal.
Okay.
It's a slippery slope, and
Yeah,
I'd like to
I know
have
what
something in there if the neighbor complains that he's
But if he
bringing
needs
things
to
in.
fix his truck because a bracket broke and he does it inside the garage, is
Yep.
that okay?
Yep.
Because that's repair of his home occupation equipment, right? But if he would fabricate a cage for someone, that's different.
Exactly.
Say it again how you want this to read, Sue?
I just want something in there that he's not doing auto repair or welding on site for customers.
Okay.
Would be the easiest way to say it.
Fabrication or repair. yeah.
Fabrication or
Repair.
repair. Thank you.
Okay. Any other last questions for staff?
Would the appellant be okay with item 3?
That's since we can post that question. You heard the zoning enforcement officer.
Okay.
Close the public portion then and go to board decision.
I'd move approval of the requested special permit for the home occupation subject to conditions 1 and 2 and Sue's kind of friendly item 3.
Okay. Been moved and seconded. Bert, you got that third item written down? Okay. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Motion carries 5-0. Item 13, we have correspondence on that. We're looking for it to amend a conditional use permit in the vicinity of 201 Southeast 6th.
And we did get a communication that's in front of you from East Village that came to us today. This item in a different form came in front of the board in 2010, asking for complete waiver of trees that were required with the original conditional use amendment that was granted in 1996, with the trees being required by 1997, and that's included in your staff report. It's the Hams property here. The hatched area includes the property in question, so they actually extend into vacated portions of Market Street and then the corner of the next block to the north. And you can't really see it through the hatching, but there's a scale that comes through here that weighs recycling. This area here To the east of the building is kind of a platform that actually sits up above the ground, like a dock, and it's not as deep as the entire, you can probably see that darker gray area here. And so that's where they store baled material that comes out of the building to get shipped away. One of the concerns that they have with full compliance to the original condition was that it was for the entire perimeter of the site. Well, their concern is that many of those areas are functional for them, and by putting perimeter trees within the site, that will limit their ability to function the way the building is designed. So staff did take that under consideration. I have some photos I will show you here. One of the things we are concerned about, though, and this will be alleviated by what they're proposing, this is the 7th Street, Southeast 7th right-of-way, and trailers are being kept basically in the public right-of-way. And it's, you know, the public right-of-way is serving as a storage yard in some respects, with gravel being laid down. This is coming at it. You can see the new construction of Southeast 6th that's going on with sidewalk, and that work's going on currently. So one of the things we're asking is that the compliance with what they're proposing be upon the completion of that project, because it really would be very difficult to start getting in there and putting in trees while the city's doing their work to fix or basically rebuild the Southeast 6th Street to a full urban cross-section. They gave us a schematic as to what they're going to build. We would still need them to build this, comply with the site plan submittal. This is a rendering of what that would be, but they would still have the perimeter on the east and west along the public streets, and then they're also showing a limited amount of trees. Now this is another property to the south. So south of the railroad, they're showing some trees as well, but not interfering with this maneuvering for this loading. Now, one of the things, when this was originally granted, there was a different set of criteria that the board considered, and now we have separate criteria for M2 uses. And one of the things about that indicates that maneuvering and storage areas have to be on a dustless surface. Well, this is a kind of an incremental amount of activity with putting in the trees, and it's not really expanding the business in itself. So staff was of the thought that this really wouldn't, on a proportionate level, justify full compliance with our current standards. However, we thought it was reasonable that as they maintain these surfaces, you know, the yard and this area where they maneuver, that those surfaces, instead of throwing down dusty white rock, it would be better if they maintain those surfaces from here forward with a recycled asphalt product. So we think that's a reasonable thing to ask as part of this. You're essentially waiving some of what was originally required, which would have been perimeter trees in this area and along this whole south area. So we think this is enough of a change to what they're doing that we can ask for that as a condition. So that is one of the things that staff is recommending as a condition of this approval, to require that any future maintenance be done with, on the surfaces, be done with a recycled asphalt product. We think that the tree planting should be planted at the conclusion of the Southeast 6th Street construction project, and that if anything exhibits some kind of a nuisance here, that there should be a reconsideration. So if something about the ongoing operation under compliance with what happens here today is still operating in under a nuisance, that we could still reconsider this in the future. One of the things that East Village is asking for is absolute putting this stuff in by the end of the fall. And while it looks like it's probably going to be able to happen under this condition that we've recommended, for whatever, for all we know, we'll have a monsoon season this fall and
Right.
things might get delayed. And I think it's,
Right.
the real situation is here, as soon as the Southeast 6 is done, let's get it done. And that's what this condition says. So I think we're on the same thought as the East Village group. They want the absolute, so.
Question, if Southeast 6 gets done November 15th, I don't know if it makes sense to
That might
plant
not be a
trees
reasonable
then.
time to plant either, correct?
I mean, is there something to put a condition in, on the completion of Southeast 6th, but no later than May 1st of 2013 or something like that? Because
That would be something the board could do, yeah. I just think we want them working on this as soon as that project is done. And
Yeah.
that may be delaying because of, it may not be
Sure.
planting
Yeah,
season, so
I
that
think it's
might
going to
be
be hard
waiting
for us
through the.
to catch that
Right.
rightly. But we had some conditions with some others, like Ed Garner's RV on Southeast 14th. 2 years later, there's no trees, and he got done what he wanted. So I'd like to have a condition that eventually this gets done
Yeah,
in
if they don't
sometime.
comply with these, this third condition would allow us to bring it back.
Okay. And another related question, the drawing shows Southeast 7th over here and the proposed big line of trees there. Is there a soil permeable area over there now where trees could be planted, or are they going to have to
if you can see
pull
we're
out the
showing
old
curved
gravel?
line here conceptual, you might ask them, we're going to need a site plan to see this, and we'll have to have
Yeah.
a.
Because I would not want them to install trees along Southeast 7th the way it is now, because you'd put trees into a packed gravel lot, and I don't
They're going to have to
understand.
do something to prepare that
Yes.
area. And that's
Okay.
why staff really likes that, because current condition promotes the storage of trailers and
Yes,
things like that.
yes, okay. Well, we'll check with them then. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Eric. Applicant, representative of the applicant?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Mark Beltrame, 3409 Southwest 44th Place. It's been a while since we've seen one another. I'd tell you it'd be a pleasure to be here, but you guys probably wouldn't believe me, so I won't tease you.
Doesn't make us feel good, though.
Yeah. Couple of things. One, there is a site plan. So I know that that was just talked about. There is a site plan on record here. And I also want to address three other things. One, the reason for the delay since 2010. We've been working with city staff, anticipating, as we did back when we were here in 2010, that this streetscape was going to take place. We wanted to make sure we didn't put all this work and money into it, only to have it ripped out. So I don't want members of the board to feel that. And then second of all, I appreciate Mr. Penn's mentioning what I mentioned back in 2010, and that is we didn't think it made sense to put trees on 7th. Nevertheless, we felt that rather than fighting it with staff, we would go along and do that. And Seth here from Confluence, the landscape architect, can answer any questions specifically about what's going to be planted. But we feel that we've gone above and beyond as it relates to what we're putting in. It isn't all 4 sections, but what we're putting in is pretty robust.
Okay.
And then finally, we're not going to fight it, but the first that I heard of the recycled asphalt request was today. And we had submitted a letter on August 6th asking, if there's going to be anything else. And I don't have a record in my file of ever having a response. So that's what I've got.
Mr. Beltrame, is this we're looking at right now, is this your site plan, or whose is this?
Yeah, it's our site plan.
Okay, all right. So we'll be talking from this then?
Correct, correct. And if you want to hear from him now, or if you'd rather ask questions, whatever makes the most amount of sense.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask Seth about those proposed trees on Southeast 7th, how you would install them or give them a fighting chance.
Yeah, Seth Gray.
I'm sorry.
Seth Gray, landscape architect with Confluence, 1300 Walnut Street, Des Moines.
Okay.
To answer your question about the street trees on 7th, what we're proposing to do is to do a full depth saw cut in the
I
existing
can't hear
pavement.
you. I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. We're proposing to do a full depth saw cut in
Okay.
the existing pavement and cutting out 5x5 squares.
Okay.
And then removing 3 feet of soil down and bringing in 3 feet of soil of good planting dirt.
And then a grade around it, or, I mean,
Pardon?
put a grade around the trees, or no?
No.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So it'll just be bare dirt?
It'll be mulched.
Okay, all right. We don't want grades. No more?
No, no.
Yeah, we've kind of moved away.
Just thought I'd ask.
Now with-
Don't have to throw me under the bus.
And Seth, as an LA and with your knowledge, if you got a 5x5 area, that's sufficient for water recharge to support
You know,
the tree root system, blah, blah, blah?
for most trees, it's not, but
Okay.
we are proposing honey locust in this location.
Okay.
As well as autumn blaze maple. Both trees are very well adapted to
Okay.
compacted environments.
Good,
So,
because I see in a lot of these big box store parking lots, they have the little island for the trees, and they plant it, and they just keep dying. They're probably putting the wrong tree style in, I'm assuming. Okay.
and I guess it's pretty self-explanatory on Southeast 6 side. We're waiting till the improvements are done. There'll be a curb put back in, along with a area of turf and a walk adjacent next to the building. So we're also looking at a few trees on the south side of the property. These would be autumn blaze maple, and there'd be 4 of those there.
How much time would you like to have to get this installed? Would you rather do it in the spring?
I think the spring would be more ideal. That way we're not kind of gambling with the Southeast 6 project. That would be our preference.
What does spring mean to you? By May 1st, by June 1st?
By June 1st.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I just want to get one clarification, Ms. But you were surprised, but you're willing to comply with the recycled asphalt? Okay, good, all right. Is there anybody else here to speak in support? Anybody here to speak in opposition?
Could I ask staff one more thing?
Sure can, because that was my next question.
Okay. If they go install all these trees on Southeast 7th, and then 2 or 3 years from now, the city decides to finally put in curb and gutter here on Southeast 7th, would they have installed the trees in any manner where the city would go, oh, well, now they're kind of in our way and we want to yank them out? Or will you kind of work with them to make sure, based on where right-of-ways alignments are,
Well,
that...
these trees will be in the public right-of-way, so.
Right.
There will be some, I mean, just like anywhere else in the city, unless we've stipulated that they're required to maintain them over time, you know, they're somewhat the responsibility of the city, because like other street trees, you know.
So
in fact,
everybody's
we
gonna...
prefer to have, our arborist prefers that we oversee the monitoring of those. And
Okay.
But let's say there was a new project and they had to be ripped out, well, certainly they would come back and put in something that complied with our current streetscape.
I was just curious, you know, if Jeb Brewer thinks, gee, we're going to make the street double wide compared to the way it is now, and we'll have to take right-of-way or take land from others, and then all that work gets thrown out the door. Or the city may not do Southeast 7th for another decade. Who knows?
Yeah, and
I'd vote on the latter.
In fairness to Mark's talking about, you know, they were negotiating kind of independently of this review of their application. I did have a conversation with Chris Della Vedova and gave him, you know, I told him that there's a technical requirement to meet these criteria, and there's a possibility that we'll, you know, ask for something beyond what you're negotiating through the site planning process. I didn't expect it to be very significant.
Okay.
We just thought this was reasonable. We're not asking them to replace everything with recycled asphalt right now.
Right.
We're just saying, as you, instead of using rock material in the future, use recycled asphalt material.
All right, so basically what they've shown on their site plan and their colored sketch would be consistent with what staff recommendations would be?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public portion, go to board decision.
Well, it sounds like everybody kind of agrees on this. I drive by this every day when I can get down Southeast 6 between the bridge repair and now Southeast 6 widening. That's a challenge, but it's going to look a lot better. It's kind of a local artery, and I think this will help improve not only this property, but help with what's going on in the district. So I would move staff recommendations for approval of the requested amendment to the conditional use permit, subject to conditions 1 through 3. And that's that.
What about your June 1st deadline?
Oh, yes, with on item 2, all proposed tree plantings shall be installed no later than June 1st of 2013.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Give you the express route this time. Worked good.
Thanks, guys.
Item 14, it's conditional use permit and exception at 2801 Fleur, and we have police reports for that location.
Item number 14 is the Rollins Mansion property on Fleur Drive. There's two parts to the request. The first part is for a conditional use permit that would allow the first floor and the lower level of the existing building to be used as a reception hall with alcohol service throughout, and it would also allow for the patio, or I'm sorry, for the outdoor garden and terrace to the east of the building to have outdoor alcohol service as well. And then the second part of the request is for an exception of 16 parking spaces less than the required 51. Based on the proposed areas for the reception hall and office uses, they would be required to provide 51 off-street parking spaces. There's 35 existing off-street parking spaces today, and that's in the parking areas to the front of the building and then to the rear of the building. They're not proposing, or they would prefer to not have to construct any additional parking on the property, which would affect the existing vegetation and the historical layout of the property, which includes the circular drive out front. Here's the site sketch. As I mentioned, there's the existing circular driveway with off-street parking, and then about 5 parking spaces over here, and then an additional 16 or so to the area east of the building, and that's accessed by a driveway that goes across the Integer property, which is the Butler Mansion, to the north. And then there's also the outdoor terrace in this area to the east of the building that they would use for their reception hall. Here's some photos of the house, or of the building as it is today. Like I mentioned, they would have the first floor and the lower level be for the reception use, and then the second and third floor dedicated for office uses. This is just a picture looking, this is looking north through the parking lot out front. Here's a photo of the parking lot behind the building. I know this photo is not very clear, but the terrace and outdoor garden is just on the other side of a short wall along the south edge of the parking lot. And this is a better photo of that rear terrace at the edge of the parking lot. You can see the wall right here. The outdoor terrace is on the other side of that. And this is looking north from the parking lot behind the building. You can see the Butler Mansion here, which is now used as offices by the Integer group. And then the consent map, we had cards from these Druid Hill townhomes submit some concerns. Most of the concerns deal with noise from the patio and the shortage of parking. Just to go back to this aerial, you can see the property and the outdoor terrace. They are pretty tight against this Druid Hills townhomes development here, which is why a lot of these neighbors are concerned about the noise. The other aspect is off-street parking. The Integer use to the north does have off-street parking lots here and over here. As you'll see in our recommendation, we recommend that they provide the number of parking spaces that they're deficient. We recommend they achieve those through some sort of lease with a surrounding property owner. In this case, it looks like the Integer use. It probably is the only use that they could get those 16 parking spaces from. I'll also say, I don't believe this parking lot here has a total of 16. I think it's more in the 12 to 14 stall range, so they would probably have to lease that as well as a few more from the area to the northeast of the Integers Butler Mansion. We felt that the building and its location is a proposed use for a reception hall or a assembly use with alcohol service. We do recognize that there are residences within pretty close proximity, so we've recommended a condition as well that any outdoor sound or music on the terrace to the east of the building be limited to a Type E sound permit, which allows background sound equipment only. And I know some of the comment cards ask that even that be cut off at 10 p.m. The staff hasn't recommended that, but that is something the board could consider. Okay. Here's the 7 conditions we've recommended. And again, the first one is that they provide a lease, or they achieve a lease for at least 16 off-street parking spaces. And then I won't read through the others, but the standard conditions we recommend. So, are there any questions?
How loud would the music be?
Type E sound permits are pretty minimal. Do you know what the decibel level on that?
There's no complaints from other people that have Type E? I mean, you think it's okay?
Type E is considered background noise on a patio at a level that you could still speak to, 65 dBA, or the ambient sound.
So a string quartet might be just fine, but somebody jamming away on the drums and cymbals probably wouldn't fit within the E.
An E is not for live music, it's for background music through speakers.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Bert, is there any topographic difference between that patio parking area and then where the interior access road is for those neighboring townhomes?
Yeah, the patio is elevated above the townhomes. I don't know if you can see this, but over the wall you can barely see the tops of the townhomes around. So it is higher above them.
Yeah.
There's this driveway here from Fleur that leads to the townhomes. It does slope quite a bit through even the parking lot.
Yeah, so I see the parking lot and then the little angled sidewalk off the parking lot to the southwest, then that goes to the patio, right? Can you point to the patio there, kind of? The patio's area is all in there, okay.
All of that area would be patio?
Yeah, or if Bert can show us here again.
Show me that.
Okay, there's the parking.
Property line is this dotted line
Yep.
here. Then the townhome buildings
Right.
right here.
So where it says garden on the east, southeast side, that's all part of the patio area, you would call? Okay. So that's where people congregate in that garden area?
Correct.
Okay. And what's your proposal for cutoff for sound time? I heard it.
Put a
You guys, okay, but the townhouse, we're talking 10?
A lot of the comment card said 10 o'clock. So.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Thanks, Bert. Applicant or representative of the applicant?
I'm Doug Wells, architect on the project, and my address is 520 42nd Street in Des Moines. And with me is Joel Wohler, the developer of the project. And I wanted to start with a few comments, and then Joel would like to talk a little bit, talk about the operation, the liquor license, and noise, and some of those issues. So Joel's the operator of the proposed facility. One question that was asked on what the topography was from the deck. If I called the outdoor upper deck space elevation 0,
sure,
the parking level is 12 feet below.
Okay.
And then the townhomes are about 28 feet below.
On their deck level as well then,
Yes.
right? From grade to grade, okay.
And then on this row of townhomes that exists, their outdoor space is on the opposite side of the building. So this line would represent the front, their front door, their garage access, and then the design of those facilities, those residences opens up to the east.
So their patios or their decks are to the east then?
Yes.
Okay.
A couple of comments on the facility, and I have some recent photographs. The intention is to preserve the house just as it is today, and the building's very intact in original condition. And another thing, as I go through these photographs, it's pretty nicely landscaped, which was done when the Clark companies occupied the facility as their offices. And that landscaping is just becoming mature now, and it is really very, very nice. If we were to try to carve in more parking spaces, we probably could net 3 or 4 more spaces, but we would really start to cut into the landscape. This is the turnaround drop-off driveway that's in the front. And this sidewalk you see in the foreground leads to the front door. There's a really nice carved limestone fountain feature that is right there. Then this would be the opposite side of the circular turnaround in the front. The landscaping's developed nicely. The kind of an overall view of the front of the building, and then the main entrance. And then I'm going around to the east side, and there are these 2 formal gardens. They're a little overgrown here, but the landscape material is, with a little maintenance and trimming, I think can be really lovely. And I guess the point I'm attempting to make with these photographs is that we could add more parking, but it would just destroy all the ambiance and the site and the setting where the house exists. And then this photograph indicates where those gardens are, and then to the right is a screen wall that is existing screen wall and retaining wall that is around the parking. And then up at this location is an outdoor deck, which is approximately 4,000 square feet. That's proposed to be used for entertainment and banquet functions. So with those thoughts, I'd like to turn it over to Joel for a little bit.
Hello, my name is Joel Wooler. I own the property at 2801 Fleur Drive in Des Moines, Iowa. Our intent for the property, and where we really fell in love with the property, is the historic nature of it. It's on the National Historic Register and the State Historic Register. So our intent with this property and in trying to find an adaptive use is to respect that use and respect the character of what exists. So with that, our intent, and if you were to say, well, what would we compare ourselves against? I would say it would be either a Salisbury House or the facility where Starbucks is, the Performing Arts Temple.
Sure.
So for a higher end finish, definitely higher end clientele. Our intent is for business meetings. Our intent is for weddings, receptions. Not the type of use where it'd be heavy partying or anything wild. We're obviously interested in preserving the interior of our property and the antiques and antiquities that are inside it. So anything that was robust would probably cause me more stress than I could handle given what's on the interior of that property.
So no Prince Harry appearances?
No, exactly. Our intents with the gardens are twofold. One is, the thought is, obviously the gardens are heavy landscape, so it would not be heavily populated just by nature of what's existing.
Okay.
The thought is more, you may have some people circling around, mingling throughout those gardens during an event as I'd call it overflow, but overflow is probably not the right language, just transferring from one spot to the other, just use of the property, not heavy partying. I have no intention to have a DJ or a dance floor on the upper deck, so that intention is not there. I would ask for consideration on the noise level to allow for, I'm not sure what the specifics are, but to allow maybe for like a string quartet or something of that level.
Yeah.
Certainly not a DJ or anything of that nature, but just kind of that ambient general feel is what we would like to maintain on the exterior of the property.
Okay.
I think that's the only.
The comment cards, the ones that are not in favor of this, a lot of them talk about they don't want any sound after like 10 o'clock. Without us playing too much with the timing here, would there be a reasonable hours of operation for your evening events that you have in mind?
I think that, and thinking through summer hours and the evening, it would be ideal maybe for an 11 or 12 o'clock cutoff. I'd probably request a 12 o'clock cutoff for events, maybe sound at 11 if that were under consideration. Again, we're not a bar. We're not looking to be open to 2 a.m. Causing distress. I'm more thinking of the winding down and shuffling people out and controlling that process.
Okay.
Secondly, the primary locations for our dinners and events will be in the interior of the property. So, that should not be an issue. And I think the question, and if I understand the concerns correctly, it's the gardens and the exteriors.
Right.
So part of that's answered by the Iowa winters in the fact that we won't be using the property for probably 4 or 5 months of the year on the exterior. And the other is trying to take advantage of that window when we have it and just enjoy the nice weather when it
Sure.
exists.
How large of a group do you plan to accommodate? Like a 500-person wedding or 600 or 200 or 100? What's the capacity?
Absolutely. I'll answer that maybe twofold. The capacity of the property, and Doug can speak to this more than I can, is around 530 for occupancy load, and that gets into our building permit and our fire life safety requirements. In practicality, when you're talking about an actual event, when we've laid out the events, I think we cap out around 200 people maximum. While you could fill every nook and cranny, that's not our intent, nor is it feasible for the way the property works, because you theoretically have somebody on the ground floor and somebody way up in the second floor. Well, that just doesn't work for an event from a reality standpoint. So when we've planned this, we've expected our maximum to be I think on the upper levels, 250, 275 would be the absolute maximum for number of people, but definitely not a 500 or 400 or anything like that.
And there were some issues with parking from some of the area neighbors that I know have probably spent a lot of money for those properties. So staff is recommending that you secure some parking next door from those owners, but how do you plan to get people to abide?
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, we also made a giant purchase here and bet. So we wanted to make sure we were successful from a business standpoint. And I think interests are aligned on both sides there. Our intention is, and we have contracted with a group to provide parking, valet service, shuttle service, et cetera, for larger events. We have secured parking at a minimum with a group that has the property to the north on Bell and Fleur. So heavy parking would not occur on our site. If you had a small business event during the day that we can facilitate the parking, excellent. If you had heavy parking, which we would need to accommodate to be able to be rentable, it would be on a rented property that we have secured nearby.
Okay. No. One more quick one. Would you be opposed to like maybe a limitation, weekends, midnight, weeknights, maybe 10 p.m. for events?
I'm open to a timing because I want to be respectful of the neighbors as well. I think the weekend probably would justify maybe a little bit longer time than a weeknight. I would ask for maybe 10:30 or 11 for consideration during the week.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you. Is there anybody else here to speak in support? Support? Okay. Yes. Got to follow the rules. Well, it's kind of tough.
That's intriguing.
Well, let me ask this. Is there anybody here to speak in opposition?
Okay.
Right, we'll determine what your stance is, because we might have to give him another shot depending on how we view this. Go ahead.
Dick Goodson, 2836 Druid Hill Drive. I live in the development and have lived in the neighborhood for a long time. Lived at 2811, 2906, built 2 houses, and now live in the townhomes. So obviously I like the neighborhood. I also was married in that particular property 12 years ago when Clark owned it. So we used it for our wedding, and then
Did you have a big party?
at Wakanda. Down the street to Wakanda after the wedding, so, which you might consider joining with them.
Okay.
No, I'm not here to stand in opposition to this. I think eventually this property needs to be sold and needs to be taken care of and needs to be maintained. Because Hubble hasn't had any use for the property, it's really slowly, if you walk your dog up there, which I do a lot,
right,
it's slowly deteriorating. So they've got some hopefully not huge, but some maintenance to do on the property, and I think that's important to maintain the mansion in the style in which it was accustomed for years and years. So I'm certainly not standing here in opposition to it. I do have some of the concerns that I think you, Mel, raised, and maybe some others regarding noise and all that kind of stuff. I think what needs to be happening here is a continuing dialogue between the homeowners and the developer and user and owner of the property over time. And I would really urge you as soon as possible to get with the board and say, you know, we're going to come over and talk, or invite us up and say, we want to talk about what the game plan is and what we're going to be doing. I think most of the people that my wife has talked to, and I've talked to very few, have more concerns about, well, how loud is that noise going to be, and when's it going to go on, and, you know, all those kind of questions. So I don't know, I haven't sensed any groundswell of huge opposition to it.
Right.
More just a lot of questions, how is this going to work? And we're really not going to have the WHO or whoever, you know, up here at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so I think it's just a function of us getting together and working and becoming good neighbors, to be honest with you. Because I think the property, we're going to have some joint issues that we're going to have to talk about at some point, where the rainwater goes and how that works. For instance, if we ever get a summer where we've got rain, because a lot of the water comes off those rocks into the townhome development. Because bear in mind, when Clark had it, he owned the whole thing. And now we've got divergent owners. You've got different people owning different pieces up there. So I think that would be my suggestion. I wanted to come down and kind of hear what was going on. I was pleased. I think the noise thing at 10 o'clock, if they can live with that, makes good sense to me. But on the other hand, I think it in large part depends on how close the homeowner is to the property. And I'm in the development, but a fair piece away. And I might have a slightly different opinion if I got closer. So, but I can see live harpist up there, you know what I'm saying? I can see that kind of activity, and have been. When Clark owned the place, we were there for a number of gala events and dinners and all that kind of thing. So as long as they keep it to the place that they're commenting they're going to keep it to, I personally think it's going to be good for the area, because it needs to be fixed up and remodeled and utilized. So that's my comment.
I take that as a positive, so.
Okay.
I really appreciate your comments, and I like your idea that of having the developer work directly with the neighbors.
Right.
So you have direct input, maybe, so you know what's going to be happening when, so you can anticipate there's going to be a wedding. The use for weddings and such, I see it as a lovely place for a small wedding or an event. So, and I also like the idea of the property being maintained so it doesn't continue to deteriorate. And I think from your perspective, you would like to see that too, since you live right there and you see it all the time.
Exactly.
So yeah, your comments were very nice.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you. So taking a quick look, I don't think, but I'll ask, is there anybody here to speak in opposition then? Any last questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public portion and go to board decision.
I just wanted to put one thing out. It sounded like you're maybe going to consider like outdoor string quartets.
Yeah.
That changes.
If they're not amplified, they don't need a sound permit.
Oh.
So
okay,
I thought I'd just clarify number 4. Any amplified sound or music shall be limited to a type E. Because right now, the way it reads, any outdoor sound or music shall be limited to a type E, which kind of could be interpreted to prohibit outdoor string quartets. So.
Okay.
But,
So
well,
does it need to be amplified?
what, a string quartet?
Yeah.
No, But by the same token, you can have a string quartet, which is acoustic, but a huge drum set with cymbals or a high-pitched trumpet is also acoustic. It's not amplified. So, you know, I don't want to get into Baroque music theory here or anything, but I see a big difference between chamber music on a patio and, you know, a tribute to Bob Dylan or something. I don't know. Or, yeah, well, but Jimi Hendrix was amplified, trust me. But, you know, what I'd like to avoid is they're jamming away on a bunch of cymbals and drums out there. And I don't know how we phrase that differently. I'm assuming you run into this conundrum. What's amplified, what's not?
Most of your drums for, you know, a rock band or something, they're amplified.
Okay.
They're putting mics on the drums.
And I guess to help us all here without having to split hairs, these are conditional use permits. So if there's a problem with it, we can come back in. If there's complaints, we can review it, change the conditions.
That's item 7 on here, so we got,
Yes.
here we go.
Or we can say, it's not working, guys. You know, you're not getting along with the nice folks in Druid Hill. We're just done with it. But I don't think we'll reach any of that. So if we can find some way to make it work, I'm fine.
It might be noted also that the sound ordinance is currently under review for revision, so you might want to add, or the sound ordinance that is in effect, so that if there is a shift that affects them, that they're bound by it. The Class E may not exactly be a Class E after it's
All right.
amended, so I just
So
want...
rather than suddenly be non-conforming to a new ordinance.
Exactly.
Okay. But we've gotten into this discussion before. How are we here to approve stuff when something else is maybe being discussed or it's not on the books? I mean, has it already been filed for approval? Or is it far enough along it's like in the works for approval? Has city council taken any direct action?
No, it's at staff level right now.
Okay. So.
Yeah, we just leave it.
You probably just leave it, and you're right, if it becomes a problem then, which I don't foresee.
No, not necessarily with anything we got here, no.
Any last questions for staff? Okay, hearing none, we'll close the public portion, go to board decision.
Well, I like what Bert clarified and what he wrote in there on item 4. As far as time for the event, do we want to, is the time when the event should be over, or when we just don't want any type E sound going on?
Type E sound.
Okay. Because if they just quit playing music out on the patio at 10:30 or 11:30, but they want to wrap up inside with cigars or whatever, I don't think we need to care about how long the event runs, unless there's going to be a flood of people coming out, you know, banging doors or something, but parking looks limited.
So you're saying?
Do we want to put something on about add time to the type E sound permit?
So you're saying weekends till probably 11 or 12?
Well, it seemed like Joel was a half-hour kind of guy. So how about 10:30 weeknights, 11:30 weekends? I wonder if he could live with that.
Kind of a question to you.
And that's just on the sound piece, correct?
You're right. It's not the event, just the sound.
Yeah,
Okay.
Let me just ask a question. Can they serve alcohol out on the patio? Are we approving that?
Yeah, that's included.
So there could still be people there at midnight. It might get a little loud. If you're serving, I mean, it's like a bar outside.
Yeah.
How respective is that for the neighbors, I wonder?
And that's something you could say that any outdoor alcohol service and any outdoor amplified sound would be cut off at 10:30 or 11:30.
What if we had a cascading thing, 10:30, 11:30 for sound, and then 11 at midnight for outdoor event? Must be over by.
Is chapter 123 involved?
I think that's a discussion between them and the neighbors. I'm not sitting here dictating how they run their business. I mean, the sound thing is different.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have if you don't need a permit for unamplified sound, I don't see how we can even put restrictions on it, but that's my opinion.
Well, that's true.
We're just awfully close to the townhomes. And they're downhill, the music's up here. I'm just concerned about that.
Actually, I think the sound works to the advantage of,
Does it?
yeah,
don't
because
know.
sound would travel out and skip them. If they were in the bowl, it would come up at them. That's how amphitheaters work. And I think the appellant also, at least the ones to the east, it's their garage door and their front door, their own decks, probably their own bedrooms don't face that way. I don't know about to the south. But again, it's conditional. If we got a problem,
we can hear it again.
And if they're good neighbors, they're going to be working with the Druid Hill folks, and everything will be hunky-dory.
I don't think it's anything, if these guys put their plan together and work it, none of these, I think, will come into play.
Yeah, because, you know, as I think Brooke was headed toward, you know, we don't need to maybe over micromanage the events here.
I'd like to see them work out what they think would be mutually beneficial for them, rather than have us hang conditions on there.
Could we just have the type E sound permit 10:30 weeknights, 11:30 weekend, keep that, or do we not want to do that? What do you guys think? Or just let them figure it out?
Yeah, who's going to enforce this time?
Okay, all right.
You going to be there?
Yeah.
Good.
No, well, if they invite me to the party, I'm not too far. Okay.
So go with amended staff recommendations. Okay. Do I hear a second? Okay, been moved and second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Motion carries 5-0. Hope you guys do work out a pretty good agreement. It sounds like there's some great possibilities there.
Yes.
And last one here is item 16, a variance at 4910 Country Club Boulevard.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, item number 16 would allow for an addition to an existing single-family dwelling. It's for a existing single-family lot at kind of a unique location. It's at the corner of 49th Street and Country Club Boulevard. It's kind of like a 5-point intersection here. So it's a fairly unique lot. It is considered a lot of record since it was here before 1965. Originally, it was part of the lot for this house here, but back in, I believe, 1955, it was split off and the house was constructed on this property. Since it's a lot of record for zoning purposes, the shorter frontage is considered the front yard. The longer frontage is considered a side yard. So the setback along 49th Street is the front yard setback, which is 50 feet, whereas the front yard setback along Country Club just has to adhere to the minimum required side yard setback, which is only 8 feet for this district. And I will point out that the public notices that went out included a variance of a 50-foot setback along Country Club Boulevard. When we put the agenda together, we had missed the fact that it was a lot of record. So the setback along Country Club is really only 8 feet rather than 50 feet. So it is a pretty significant difference. That said, I think from the cards, most of the neighbors, we have 4 or 5 come back, they are still concerned with putting anything in this area, regardless of whether the setback is 8 feet or 50 feet. It's pretty clear they're concerned with how the proposed addition would affect the character of the area. Here's a sketch of what the applicant is considering. It's a single-family house. It's kind of a U-shaped house right now. They would add an entryway addition here and then an attached garage here. There's currently a 1-car stall at the south end of the building. They would have a new 2-car garage accessed by a driveway from 49th Street. And then they would also construct a courtyard around this area here with trellis and whatnot in the courtyard. They haven't finalized any of the designs on it yet. they've just indicated they would intend to have like a flat roof design to minimize the bulk or the size of the addition, since it is sticking or facing to the public streets. Here's another, I guess, the layout of the lot. You can see the garage addition here with the new garage, or the new driveway from 49th Street. And then they would also like to replace or repair the existing fence that is surrounding the rear, or this area here, which for the house, it functions as the rear yard, but for zoning purposes, again, this is considered the front yard, even though the house is over in the opposite direction. So that is kind of a unique situation. Here's a photo of the house today. The one-car garage is at the south end of the house. They would be adding the entryway addition and the garage, new two-car garage onto the north end. Here is that existing garage. This is looking south from kind of the intersection at Country Club and 49th. This is the open area where the addition would be constructed. And this is, doesn't show a whole lot, just the trees. This is looking at the house from 49th Street. The addition would come out in this area here, so this fence and vines and plants would have to be removed. And this is, you can see the top of the house. This is the existing fence that would be removed or repaired. If they remove it, they would lose the grandfather rights for being in the front yard. So that's one of their appeals, is to replace that fence. And then here's the consent map. There are 4 or 5 comment cards and then a couple of letters or emails have passed around. So staff feels that it is reasonable to allow them to have a larger garage than the existing one-car garage. We do feel that the proposal is reasonable. We've recommended approval subject to 3 conditions. And the first 2 just deal with building materials and design. They're not far along enough in the process that they know exactly what materials or what the final design is going to be. So we've recommended that the design and materials be in conformance with a plan as approved by the planning administrator for both the addition and the fence. I know I've talked to the applicant and they don't really agree with that condition. They would rather it be just left up to them what those materials are. From staff's perspective, we would like some sort of latitude or just assurance that what gets built is compatible with the existing house and the surrounding neighborhood. So we've recommended those 2 conditions. And then the third is the typical: any construction shall be in compliance with any building codes or fire codes. Any questions?
No.
The garage thing kind of makes sense to me, but I'm a little confused about a privacy fence or exterior courtyard where we're walling in a front yard. Do we have anything else like that in this neighborhood or this area?
I'm not aware of any. I mean, as the applicant.
As I look at the front of the house, kind of a brick, post-war modern colonial aspect, I'm a little concerned of building some kind of a stockade where we're fencing in, walling in a garage here.
Fort Apache.
Yeah, well, yeah. Was there any hardship given for the need to have the?
And I tried to clarify, the setback from this property line is actually only 8 feet.
Right.
So this courtyard and the garage would meet that 8-foot setback.
But don't we also discuss the general character of the neighborhood and da-da-da-da-da? I mean,
if you're going to approve the variance for the setback along 49th Street, you can put conditions on that as well. So.
Thank you.
But the fence they're getting the appeal for, the variance for, is this fence here that's within the front yard setback on 49th.
And can you show us a picture of that again? Was that where we kind of see the dormer window thing?
Yeah.
Okay. That's what it looks like from 49th there. Is that on the sidewalk where you took that from, or the car window?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're only asking for the fence is there now, and it's been grandfathered in, but if it comes down,
Right.
they would have to,
Yeah, if it comes down, they lose their grandfather rights. They would need the variance because they would be limited to a 3-foot solid fence or a 4-foot chain link fence in the front yard.
What would you normally,
The front yard.
You're talking about the one.
Yeah.
how high could a fence normally be in a normal front yard setback?
3 feet if it's solid, 4 if it's 75% open, which is
All right.
chain link.
All right,
or
so
wrought
up to
iron.
3 foot if it's solid. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Bert. Applicant, representative the applicant?
Good afternoon. I'm Rod Cruzy. I live at 5016 Pleasant Street. I'm an architect, so the debate is interesting as we go through this. I should point out that my wife and I don't own the property. We got permission from the Strickland Trust to see if this was possible because we're interested in buying the property. It's for sale now. You probably saw the sign in the window. We obviously don't want to buy a property that we can't make a home that's appropriate for us to live in. So that's why we're here.
So it's your plan to live there yourself, not
We would live,
speculative?
if we buy this, we would live there.
Okay.
We've lived in Des Moines since, in the city proper, since mid-90s-ish, and sold a house and have been looking for a place to do something for 2 years, and we're hoping to find something. I think what's interesting is between staff's early observations about the setbacks, and we may have created some of our own problems with the neighbors because we shared with some of the neighbors that the entire property, for all practical purposes, we thought, had major setback problems because this line and this line are 50 feet off of properties. So I think we maybe caused some heartache in the city. What's interesting is that based on this, as I understand it, we could build a substantial garage right here within zoning requirements, which in my mind would be more detrimental to the neighborhood than where we proposed it, should it be acceptable, because it does then really crowd Country Club Boulevard. We chose this spot, and I think one other thing that's interesting, if I can use one of Bert's images, I think one of the neighbors discussed the fact that they were concerned about pedestrians or children on a busy intersection. The edge of the garage would essentially be the same corner of the pool enclosure that's there now.
Sure.
So for all practical purposes, the garage would replace the mass of the fence. It'd be maybe 9 feet tall or something of that nature. So sight lines and safety issues, I think, I can understand why somebody would ask the question, but I don't think they're really relevant. You'll also see that the east side of the garage is set back further to the west than the existing structure, so we're not proposing any more on 49th Street. We felt the driveway off of 49th Street was better because there's less traffic rather than putting it onto Country Club Boulevard where there's more traffic at that corner, because 49th Street has to take a turn, run parallel to Ingersoll before it goes back out, so it's not really a through street, not nearly as much traffic on it. I think the other thing, just in terms of consistencies, if you notice across the street at the multifamily housing, about where my pen is the property line, that setback is quite minimal. And even the property across the street has a setback which is less than what we've been trying to do. We really, the other thing that we thought we were hoping to do is upgrade a property that is fairly deteriorated. The house currently had trees growing out of a swimming pool. We hope that this would be received with great interest and excitement. So based on, and I want to put the fence thing to rest. This sketch was forced to be done quickly to meet a deadline.
Sure. You're not really going to do a stockade.
I'm not going to do a stockade. I mean, if we do anything, it will be of material similar to the rest of the structure. And I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's stone. I don't know if that's brick. I don't know what it is.
Right.
But we would never do that. And we probably will supplement that substantially with landscaping. Obviously, the front yard on 49th Street, that fence is in great disrepair and would need to be corrected in some manner or fashion. So as I understand it, the variance really deals with the setback off of 49th Street. Potentially the turnaround, although since it's not all that to scale yet, we may actually comply with the 24 feet in the driveway, but that's in there and I think we should do it. then the replacement of the fence, and I'm hoping the flat roof, because I understand the ordinance doesn't allow a flat roof without a variance as well, visual flat roof. And we think that's important to kind of keep the scale of the project down. So with regards to the neighborhood and the comments, you know, the privacy fence really only is relevant, I think, in sense of 49th Street in terms of compliance with the zoning ordinance, the setback we talked about, and the traffic we talked about. And I guess the only thing I would ask for in terms of control of design is, you know, if it's in the spirit of what the neighborhood is, I don't know if there should be any more restrictions put on us than a neighbor who decides to repaint their house or put a different brick on it or add shutters or change the, you know, the roofing shingles. So I would hope you would, I mean, obviously it needs to comply with all city fire code requirements and quality materials, things of that nature, but I would hope it wouldn't be, you know, kind of a design by committee as we put it together. So we don't own the house. If this passes, we may more aggressively try to purchase the house. We think it'd be a great contribution to the neighborhood. I think when we're done, people would think it was wonderful, and I think it would improve the property values of the whole neighborhood, to be honest with you. So thank you for your time.
Questions?
Brad, are you okay with the staff recommendations, or you're saying that first one is too restrictive?
I think the only thing that we're really concerned about is the definition of what the materials are. I mean, if it's approval in terms of a quality material that complies with fire codes and ordinances, fine. If it's an aesthetic decision, it doesn't seem like that's something that the city should probably mandate. So,
how do you define that as a city?
The way it's worded, we would just leave the final design up. He wouldn't design it, but the planning administrator would just have to bless, I guess, the final design just to make sure it is compatible with the existing house and surrounding neighborhood. You're right, it is a subjective decision. I'm sure the planning administrator would, I guess, consult the urban designer or the architect on staff with the city to get her opinion. But you're right, it is maybe ambiguous, or there's some room for.
One of the criteria is that.
Yeah.
So just a question, so I understand it. If that lot were there and we were in all setbacks, would the city have any control over the visual design?
No.
Because that's kind of the question I'm asking, is there's a point of it. I mean, if you leave it in and that's what it is, we'll work with the city and we'll try and get something that's acceptable.
Right.
I just was questioning a little bit about sort of whether that's an undue burden. Because if it were an empty lot, we could probably build anything as long as we complied with city codes and stuff.
But it's a little bit of quid pro quo. I mean, if you're here asking for a variance or an exception, and you want that from us, then it's our job to look at how it would blend in, and then we do have the opportunity to discuss some of those things. And we don't like to micromanage anybody, no. But I am curious though, Rod, with what you've discussed with the courtyard, and yes, it's not going to look like, you know, F Troop Fort Apache or something here, but do you want to have a 6-foot high solid courtyard fence, or are we talking privacy or just transforming the space into a front courtyard?
Little of each. It's a very public street. There's a lot of traffic on it, and that's the only real private area potentially on the entire lot for living. A little bit on 49th Street, but if you've been there, you'll also see that little driveway that's here actually encroaches on the property.
Yeah.
And it's full of cars and their recyclables and trash and things. So that's not exactly the greatest place for us to live in terms of outdoor
checking it out,
barbecuing and stuff. So, you know, I mean, I don't know what that fence is. The idea is to create some sense of enclosure so we don't feel like we're sitting, you know, out with everybody driving by. Is it 6 feet? When I came in, I said, I don't know how high it is. And staff's comments were, well, if it's over 3, you might as well ask for 6, and that way you've got some freedom. So, you know, and that was just good advice in terms of we don't know what it is. If we had to do that entirely with landscape, we'd probably try and do it with landscape. Obviously, leaves fall off, and we do winter barbecuing and things of that nature. So, you know, I really believe when we're done, it would be a positive addition, not a barrier, not like we shut ourselves out. But it is a unique lot because there's kind of cars on every side of you as you sit there. So you have to wait till you've been asked, I think. That's my wife, if you want her to comment. She's going to be a supporter.
Brooke, did you have something?
Well, I was just agreeing with the applicant. I'm kind of confused on how the city could tell them what type of materials or look they could use other than that it meets the building code. I've always felt that way. I don't get it. It's not our place to even dictate that. And knowing Rod and his work in the past, I'm sure it'll be a big improvement to the neighborhood versus, and I'm somewhat taken back by the neighbors' cards, to be real honest. I've lived in that neighborhood for a long time.
Okay.
Any other questions for me?
Rod, with what you've learned about the setbacks and in some of the discussion we've had here, would this be something where maybe you would want to defer this for 1 month, go visit with your neighbors, show them your drawings? Perhaps there was a lot of confusion or concern, the unintended consequence thing. It's easier to say no than to understand what you're talking about.
And I'm going to come full disclosure. One of the neighbors objected is also trying to buy the house. So there's a little bit of interest here. That's kind of, since they're not here to say that, has also put an offer in on the house. So I don't know how honest all of the objections are.
And conversely, since we only have an 8-foot setback, then maybe you could go, well, gee, I'll just redesign my thing, and maybe I can do it without even being in front of this board.
Yeah, I could literally put the garage, I believe, in front of the other garage now, and I don't think the neighbors would like it.
It doesn't sound like you want to do that.
Well, I don't think the neighbors would like it. As a design professional, I think it's a mistake. I think it's much more of an intrusion on the neighbors than this solution. We can ask my wife for her opinion as well, because we're in this together. I'm not terribly interested in delaying it a month. I know, it's time we got to decide if we're going to buy the house or not and move on. That's kind of where we are. And we thought we just didn't want to buy it and worry about this later. So
sure,
that's how we did it.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions?
No.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything, or? Okay.
My name is Jan Berg-Cruzy, and I live at 5016 Pleasant, married to Rod, and I'm also here to present my position. The one thing I wanted to point out when you're asking about the courtyard and the fact that that really will become our living space outdoors, and we are very much involved in nature, and we like the outdoors to be indoors. I think it's important for you to see that that is a pergola that we're trying to create there, and the wall here, we're thinking about perhaps creating both of this wall and this wall as glass. Totally glass. So to answer your specific question, it's really important to create a very private wall there in order to have that outdoors inside for us in our living. We were in a house that was 6,000 square feet, and we're moving down to something that's 2,400. We believe to be a good steward and to be in the sustainable consciousness, and to also use passive solar here, and to do some of those things that you need to open your home up and kind of include the outdoors inside. I'm involved with plantings and trees. I planted all those trees up and down 37th Street, and there are 87 of them. So I guess I'm the one that pushes that quite a bit, in that I really need that outdoors inside, especially if we're living in a much smaller space than we're used to. So that it does look like a fortress wall right now, I see that, but that's not the intent. The intent is to create a private outdoor space, and we will have glass area all to that for our living space. So that was one thing that I wanted to point out. And the other thing was, it was quite intentional that we looked at not having the garage doors out on Country Club, because Country Club is a very beautiful street, and all of the homes there are very beautiful. And it was intentionally thought through, well, if we can tuck this around to the back, it's less obtrusive, and it becomes something that really isn't even noticed, because the apartments on 49th Street all sit about 12 to 15 feet higher than this house. They don't even look into this house, they look way over this house. So it's not like being on 49th Street is creating an obstruction to anybody that lives across the street from there. The other thing is, it literally does not extend any further northwest into that green space. For one thing, we want green space, but for another thing, it's at the same site as where the fence for that old pool is. So those were kind of my concerns. I realize it's hard to look at this photo and understand the importance of privacy to that courtyard.
Okay.
Okay?
I don't see anybody here in opposition, so if there's any last questions for staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public portion, go to board decision.
I like
Make
the
one
plan.
point. It was brought up on the flat roof. As long as the predominant part of the dwelling has the pitched roof, it's within their discretion to use a flat roof design for the addition. If that becomes the predominant part of the dwelling, then they would have to come back for relief from the board.
More good news for you. Okay.
I like the plan. I think they have a good plan. I totally get the idea with the fences. To me, they're kind of on an island right there. I think it's going to be a great asset. The comments, yes, I think the comments that came back on the cards are not in favor of, but I think a lot of that is just people don't understand. You know, what we don't know, we seem to fear. And a couple of cards said, well, it's not even owner occupied. And, you know, I just don't think they, you know, it's not important. They don't understand it because they're not involved with it. So I think it'll be a great addition, and I totally support it. I like everything about it. I'm not concerned about the substantial conformance with the design. You know, I think that's just there. They don't want somebody to build a, you know, pink and purple house. And they just want it to blend in. I'm sure these people will do it. I don't see that there's any issues.
I see it's 10 to 4, so could I get a motion from somebody? It might move this right along.
I'd make a motion to move staff recommendations.
Let me ask this, and you're going to second it? The only thing I ask, what would you think about striking condition 1? I think that's kind of what he was asking.
I think he's okay with it. I mean, I think the comfort of the city, they just want to, I think everybody's going to work together. I can't imagine that the city's going to come back and say, oh, we don't like this. I mean, it's just normal stuff. Just like if I build a brand new house, I'd still have to have a site plan and show you what I'm going to build.
I think, do I have permission to speak? I think that what we are after with number 1 is actually facilitating his time frame a little better. You know, normally we'd actually expect to have a more detailed design so that the board could make the judge as to what meets the essential character. This is a way of doing something more administratively internally. I don't think we're trying to hijack anybody's design. It's just our way of assuring that we don't need to come back to the board and say, you know, otherwise we're really designing up here at the Board of Adjustment table, and I don't think he wants that either. So that's really what we were after, and we've done that in the past on occasion.
I don't want to get into brick veneer and real brick.
It's really the board's power to review it in terms of its design. Well, in lack of having that detail right now, I think this gives you some assurance that we will do some level of review for compatibility, but we're not there to design by committee, as you mentioned. We have an architect on staff that we use to provide advisory to the planning director. So I don't really perceive a problem with that. If it does become an issue, he does have the opportunity to bring it back, I guess.
I think they still have to negotiate the sale, and
right, and I don't want to interfere with the timing on that. This was going to make it a little quicker. Otherwise, like you said, we'd bring it back and you take a look at what his renderings look like, and I think timing isn't going to be good for that. So that's what we're really intending.
I can live with that then. Linda moved and Brooke, you seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
I don't like the 6-foot fence, but it'll pass.
Motion carries 4-1. We'll be driving by checking it out. Thank you. And I do want to say, you know, at 5 to 4, for the last item on the agenda, you guys probably are probably one of the earliest ones we've ever gone through, so. Normally, we'd be here till 5:30 or 6, so.
For the last
We
item.
get you out so you can start getting your permit, or get your buying papers put together. Okay, we got minutes to approve. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from last month's meeting.
A second?
I'll second the motion.
Someone?
Moved and seconded. You're going to abstain. Yep. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Those abstaining, motion carries 4-0 with one abstention. Any business to discuss for next month? Should be everybody here. That'd be the September, 26th meeting. So look forward to seeing everybody. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Yay.